Warrior Lore. Chapter 2707. Hijibai had seen the purple-robed youth's strength and felt that he must have hidden a lot of his cultivation. Although the flames in the cave were overflowing and releasing a terrifying aura, Hijibai felt that the greater the commotion, the greater the chances of the purple-robed youth surviving. If the purple-robed youth was already dead, it would be impossible to cause such a huge commotion. As soon as he said this, the other 7 people nodded in agreement. Everyone had long seen that the purple-robed youth's strength was definitely far above Hijibai's. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to deal with Daishuanzi so miserably. Moreover, he wouldn't have been the only one who could successfully break through the spatial barrier under everyone's feet. Young master, what should we do? Should we leave this place first? Hijibai's 2 subordinates looked at him and asked. In the origin space, this was far from the only place with hidden opportunities and benefits. The hundreds of thousands of people who entered had already scattered to various places to search for them. Right now, no matter what the outcome of the battle between the Bloodfire Divine Lotus and the purple-robed youth was, they wouldn't be able to obtain anything here. Rather than wasting time here, he might as well go somewhere else and search for it. Let's wait for a while longer. In any case, it's still a long time before the origin space closes. A few days won't make a difference. Hijibai thought for a moment and said. Hearing this, the 2 subordinates looked at each other in dismay. They couldn't figure out what their young master was thinking. However, with their status, it wasn't good for them to question anything. They only needed to obediently follow orders. Such a rare young expert, I really want to make friends with him. I hope nothing bad happens to him. No one said anything else. Only Hijibai sighed softly in his heart. He silently looked at the sea of flames below, but couldn't see anything. There was only boundless flames jumping about. Within it, the battle between Du Xiaofu, the flaming skeleton, and the Bloodfire Divine Lotus was still ongoing. However, with the passage of time, the situation between them had undergone a great change. The flaming skeleton, which was originally able to handle the pincer attacks of Du Xiaofu and the Blood Flame Divine Lotus with ease, now seemed to be unable to hold on. Over the years, in order to refine the Blood Flame Divine Lotus, both of them had consumed too much of their energy. They were in a delicate balance, and neither of them could do anything to the other in a short period of time. Now that Du Xiaofu had rashly barged in, a third force was formed. Even if it was very weak compared to them, it was enough to break the balance between the two. It was precisely because of this that the flaming skeleton wanted to kill Du Xiaofu and borrow his strength to deal with the Blood Flame Divine Lotus. But what he didn't expect was that under their joint efforts, he was gradually unable to hold on. Bolts of lightning rained down, coupled with the crushing pressure of the Blood Flame Divine Lotus, and a monstrous force surged forth. The flaming skeleton was on the verge of breaking apart, and it emitted creaking noises. Stinking brat, you've tricked this old man. At this time, the flaming skeleton finally felt danger and couldn't help but cry out. He felt the threat of death and knew that it would be very difficult for him to walk out of this lava space alive today. You old thing, you wanted to kill me as soon as I came in, and you have the nerve to say that I tricked you? Du Xiaofu snorted coldly. The majestic scarlet bone horse monkey raised his hand and shot out another bolt of lightning, fiercely smashing into the flaming skeleton. He did not show any mercy in his attacks. The other party had always wanted to kill him, so he was his enemy. This old man had no choice. Otherwise, a good seedling like you would have to be my disciple no matter what. If it wasn't for the fact that I had no choice, this old man wouldn't have chosen to kill you. The old man sighed as he spoke. His hoarse voice sounded somewhat terrifying. Bah! Du Xiaofu spat and reprimanded. If you had asked for my help from the beginning, I might not have refused. But you wanted to take my life from the beginning. Is this what you mean by having no choice? The scarlet bone horse monkey clenched his teeth, his voice filled with hatred. Just as he had said, if the old man had asked him to lend a hand when he first entered this place, he might not have refused. He had just come to the 33 heavens, so if he could make friends with some powerhouses, it would be of great benefit to him. At most, while helping him, he would ask for an exorbitant price and take the opportunity to extort some benefits from him. That's all. Needless to say, After adding his own power, the Blood Flame Divine Lotus would definitely not be the old man's match. It would be much easier for it to be refined in the end. However, it was too late to say anything now. Du Xiaofu had no intention of stopping at all. At the very least, before an opportunity to escape appeared, he would not hesitate at all. What is a little brat like you know? The flaming skeleton old man was somewhat angry and snorted at Du Xiaofu. This old man is only one step away from refining the Blood Flame Divine Lotus. His body has already been completely fused with by me. Only the power of his true spirit remains. This is also why you only saw the Blood Flame Divine Lotus when you came in and didn't see my true body. If I were to ask you to help me deal with the Blood Flame Divine Lotus's true body, that would be the same as dealing with me. Only by borrowing your power and entering my soul can I cause damage to its true spirit, allowing me to completely obliterate it. Du Xiaofu heard the old man's words and immediately understood the meaning behind them. The old man had already refined the Blood Flame Divine Lotus's true body and fused it with his own. The Blood Flame Divine Lotus only had a wisp of its true spirit left, struggling to resist. If it succeeded in resisting, then both its true body and the old man's body would belong to it. And the reason the flaming skeleton didn't ask Du Xiaofu to help was because there really wasn't much he could do to help. In the battle between the two, all that was left was the final struggle between the Yuan spirit and true spirit, and this was being carried out within the old man's true body. If Du Xiaofu harbored ill intentions and took advantage of the moment when both sides were injured to make a move, the Blood Flame Divine Lotus and the old man himself would be consigned to eternal damnation. Perhaps this was still a gamble for the Blood Flame Divine Lotus, but to the old man, he was gambling with his life. This was not a good deal, so it was better to just kill him. The old man's greatest miscalculation was that the Blood Flame Divine Lotus still retained a great deal of power. Moreover, it had truly joined forces with the purple-robed young man, causing everything to go out of his control. Old bastard, nothing you say can change the outcome today. Du Xiaofu roared out. The scarlet horse monkey's soul erupted with resplendent golden light, causing the flames to surge. Under his control, continuous thunderbolts kept appearing out of thin air, intertwining with each other and crisscrossing to weave a huge net of light, which covered the flaming skeleton and kept bombarding it. At the same time, the illusory Blood Flame Divine Lotus on the other side also emitted a monstrous might. It carried a might that could crush everything as it spat out an incomparably ferocious fiery light that ferociously charged towards the skeletal old man. Arg, very soon, the skeletal old man shrieked out miserably as he endured tremendous pain. His strength had already reached its limit. Coupled with the Blood Flame Divine Lotus and Du Xiaofu working together, he had depleted far too much of his strength. At this moment, he was finally close to being unable to hold on any longer. Under the combined attacks of the two of them, he gradually became unable to hold on. He was about to collapse. Is there still no chance to escape? Du Xiaofu used the laws of lightning to attack as he used the power of his soul to scout the surroundings. He wanted to find an opportunity to escape. However, to his disappointment, the surrounding space was still the same as before. It was unshakable. He had originally thought that after the old man had expended so much of his strength, he would not have any more power to pin him down here. However, he had never thought that after the old man reached the end of his tether, the Blood Flame Divine Lotus would gradually take control of his body. After fusing with the old man's body, it still possessed extremely terrifying strength. It did not give Du Xiaofu any opportunity to take advantage of it. Du Xiaofu's heart could not help but gradually sink when he saw this. Blood Flame Divine Lotus, you've already gained the upper hand. It's no longer difficult to kill this old thing. It's only a matter of time. Since that's the case, why don't you let me leave right now? I don't want to get too deeply involved in your enmity. Du Xiaofu suddenly stopped, and the lightning that filled the sky abruptly withdrew. The red-bone horse monkey's soul turned to look at the huge figure of the blood-red lotus in the sky. However, the Blood Flame Divine Lotus did not give a response. It continued to focus on dealing with the flaming skeleton, suppressing it to the point where it was unable to turn the situation around. It was easy to imagine that it wouldn't be long before the skeletal old man would definitely die. At this moment, Du Xiaofu's only thought was to leave this place as soon as possible. Otherwise, when the blood flame divine lotus won in the end, if it did not care about his kindness and instead wanted to kill him to recover some of its strength, the situation would be extremely bad. In the boundless sea of fire, the old man let out a blood-curdling scream again. His aura gradually weakened. Although he would not die just like that, under the suppression of the blood flame divine lotus, defeat was only a matter of time. Brat, once this old man dies, the blood flame divine lotus will not let you off. This old man has suppressed it for tens of thousands of years, causing it to be extremely weak. It is now time for it to be greatly nourished. Once it is free, the first thing it will do is kill you. You have to know that the strongest fire attribute laws are able to refine all matter in the world, turning it into the purest energy and then absorbing it for use. And your cultivation is also quite good, so you are an absolute tonic for it. The skeletal old man shouted anxiously. Then, as if he had thought something through, he let out a long sigh, then gritted his teeth and said, "You brat, you might be the nemesis of this old man's life. Meeting you is truly the misfortune of 8 lifetimes. Not only did you not help this old man, but you also caused me to fall into such a dead end. Forget it. Forget it. No matter what, I can't let this blood flame divine lotus take advantage of me. Anyway, you can see that the blood flame divine lotus will not let you go. If you believe this old man, then let me help you refine it." Hearing the old man's words, Du Xiaofu's scarlet horse monkey primordial spirit's face could not help but be moved. Although he did not dare to believe this skeletal old man, it would be a lie to say that he did not have any intention of doing so. The blood flame divine lotus was a spiritual object of heaven and earthborn in a place of extreme yang, and it carried the strongest fire attribute laws. In particular, the blood flame divine lotus was even more extraordinary. It could be seen from the strength displayed by the old man. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to fight against him for tens of thousands of years without being completely destroyed. After gaining control of the heavenly ways in Shenwu world, Du Xiaofu gradually realized that there were many different types of laws in this world. As for himself, he had only mastered a few of them. The lightning attribute laws and the space attribute laws were his strongest techniques. At most, he could add in a few other ultimacies. But within the 33 heavens, profound meaning level methods weren't something that could be used. Previously, when he was being chased by that old dog from the house of Zongheng, Du Xiaofu realized that his techniques were not enough. All the techniques that had been successful in the past were not enough. He urgently needed to understand the direction of his cultivation and at the same time, obtain more techniques to fight against his enemies. This is tempting me. Right now, an opportunity was right in front of him, but he was hesitating. If this skeletal old man was sincere in helping him, then he really would have a chance to completely refine the blood flame divine lotus. When that happens, he would gain another powerful technique, and his strength would increase greatly. The only thing he could not be sure of was whether or not this old man would trick him at a critical moment and put him in a situation of no return. If that was the case, then the result would not be good at all. Du Xiaofu's primordial spirit silently sat in the void. His pupils turned as he looked at the scene before him. The huge blood flame divine lotus continued to spit out terrifying flames that submerged the old man's skeleton. The vast aura was like an abyss, suppressing the old man to the point that he didn't have much strength to retaliate. "Young man, what are you hesitating for?" Just as Du Xiaofu was thinking, the skeletal old man spoke again. He said somewhat hurriedly, "If you continue to hesitate, then I will be burned to death by the blood flame divine lotus. At this time, you still don't trust me? If you wait any longer, even if you think it through, I won't have the strength to help you deal with the blood flame divine lotus. If you suspect that I have ulterior motives, then you don't have to. I don't have any more strength to refine it. After we join forces to suppress it, I'm afraid that the blood flame divine lotus and I will be at your mercy. The world is unpredictable. I have worked hard for tens of thousands of years, but in the end, I still have to help you, stinking brat. Even so, you are still hesitating. You don't trust me. Chapter 2708. Stinking brat. If you don't say anything, this old man won't care anymore. At worst, we'll both die. This old man has indeed suffered a great loss, but you'll be buried with me. The skeletal old man sensed that Du Xiaofu had not made a move and was truly anxious. If that brat knew what was good for him, the two of them would still have a chance to live. But who would have thought that he would not believe his words at all? Even though he was very tempted by the huge temptation, he was still very cautious. That's right. Who told me to attack him the moment he entered this lava space, intending to kill him? If it were anyone else who had encountered such a thing, they would not easily believe him. Thinking of this, the two rows of teeth on the old man's skull that was submerged in the sea of fire cracked open, as if he was smiling bitterly. Fine, I'll believe you this time. After a long period of careful consideration, Du Xiaofu finally made up his mind and made a huge decision. The red-bone horse monkey that was entrenched in the void also nodded its huge head forcefully. It was not that Du Xiaofu was certain of this skeletal old man's character, but he just wanted to take a gamble. Most importantly, after the blood-flame divine lotus gained the upper hand, it was obvious that it would not let him leave. Rather than wasting time here and waiting to be killed and refined by the other party, he might as well believe this skeletal old man this time and take the initiative to attack. If he really did want to help him, then he would have profited greatly in the end. Men die for wealth, and birds die for food. Faced with such a huge temptation, how could Du Xiaofu not be tempted? Anyway, he could not escape. If he took a gamble, he might be able to obtain unexpected benefits. At least you're a little smart, the skeletal old man said happily. Now, whether or not he could keep his life depended on how this brat was going to do. Old man, don't talk nonsense, tell me what to do, Du Xiaofu said without the slightest trace of politeness. He opened his mouth and closed it with the word old fart, causing the skeletal old man to be speechless. After a while, he said, I will use the law of space to break open a gap. When the time comes, you just have to attack with all your strength and send your attacks into it. Leave the rest to me. Remember, success or failure depends on you. Don't hide it anymore, otherwise, both of us will die in the end. After the blood flame divine lotus true spirit is severely damaged, I will tell you what to do next. There's no time to lose. If you're ready, let's begin immediately. Without waiting for Du Xiaofu's consent, the old man immediately displayed the power of the law of space. In Du Xiaofu's eyes, he saw a pitch-black spatial crack suddenly appear in the midst of the fiery and violent flames. It was like the huge mouth of the Demon King, extending all the way to Du Xiaofu. A strange aura was emitted from this spatial crack. It was indescribably mysterious. Du Xiaofu used the power of his origin spirit to investigate, but he could not see the true meaning behind it. He did not know what kind of mysteries were hidden inside. However, he did not think too much about it. The red-bone horse monkey's origin spirit retreated and instantly returned to his physical body. Around him, the omnipresent pressure was greatly reduced and was no longer as strong as before. Du Xiaofu also regained his ability to move. He knew that this was the old man's method. Sacred Sword Roar. The purple-gold heavenly tower appeared in Du Xiaofu's hand. He did not hesitate at all and directly slashed out with his sword. Endless energy surged and surged in the fiery space. The runes that filled the sky swept out and finally gathered in one place, turning into an incomparably terrifying sword light. It let out an earth-shaking roar, like a surging river, and brazenly charged into the spatial crack. In the space in front of Du Xiaofu, another huge spatial crack was slashed open. However, what shocked him was that the spatial crack that the skeletal old man used only shook twice under his fierce and domineering sword attack. It did not suffer much impact at all, and still appeared there impressively. This was too unbelievable. Under normal circumstances, how could Du Xiaofu's attack not even shake a spatial crack? However, the reality had really happened, causing him to be extremely shocked. It could only be said that the spatial laws that this old man grasped were countless times more profound than Du Xiaofu's. Sword breaking 10,000 miles. Although Du Xiaofu was shocked, he did not think too much about it. He turned his hand and slashed out with his sword again. The resplendent sword light was like a divine sword that could split the heavens, outstanding in the world. The two consecutive sword lights entered the spatial crack almost at the same time. They were like oxen entering a quagmire and did not cause much of a commotion. Du Xiaofu was puzzled, completely unaware of the skeletal old man's intentions. However, before his doubts could deepen, he saw an extremely strange scene. In the distance, in front of the blood-flame divine lotus phantom, the space suddenly burst open and a huge gap was torn open. After that, two violent rays of light shot out from the blood-flame divine lotus one after the other, and they slashed directly at the blood-flame divine lotus's phantom, causing it to have no time to dodge at all. What a domineering method! Du Xiaofu trembled all over and almost lost his mind. The skeletal old man's methods were too shocking. The application of spatial law actually reached such a wondrous pinnacle level. When Du Xiaofu fought with him before, the old man had already displayed extremely mysterious methods, leading Du Xiaofu's attacks to unknown places one by one. At this time, he actually used that incomparably mysterious method to completely ignore the barrier of space and let Du Xiaofu's attack directly affect the phantom of the blood-flame divine lotus. This kind of domineering and mystical divine ability was too shocking. Du Xiaofu thought about it and felt that it seemed to be somewhat similar to his first form Rising Sun Day. The difference between the two was that the first form Rising Sun required one's body to pass through space in order to create an unexpected effect. The skeletal old man's methods were 100 times more mysterious. Just imagine, a person with such an ability could directly launch an attack into the void crack, and then control that attack and place it anywhere it will. No matter who faced such an unpredictable attack, they would be caught off guard. No one would be able to predict when and where it would land on them. When facing such an opponent, the pressure in one's heart could be imagined. As expected of the old man, his methods are really heaven-defying. Du Xiaofu sighed and thought in his heart that when he should properly study this method, as long as he could get out of this predicament, regardless of whether he could obtain the blood-flame divine lotus or not, the harvest would be huge. Some of the things that the skeletal old man had shown were enough for him to comprehend for a long time. "Brat, what the fuck are you in a daze for?" The skeletal old man's dissatisfied shout came from afar, pulling Du Xiaofu back to reality. He straightened his expression and shouted, raising his sword and slashing, "Heaven and earth are empty." Qi La, the sword light that penetrated the heavens, shook the universe and attacked the spatial crack in front of him. Du Xiaofu could already tell that his ferocious attacks had been processed by the skeletal old man, so they could be directly used on the blood-flame divine lotus true spirit and avoid causing too much damage to the old man. Otherwise, with his current weak state, if he was ruthlessly slashed by Du Xiaofu, he would have to suffer a lot. Buzz, humph. When the sword light struck the blood-flame divine lotus, it emitted a buzzing sound, accompanied by a muffled groan from the skeletal old man. Even though it had been processed, Du Xiaofu's attack still caused him a lot of damage, causing his aura to become even more dispirited. This was also the reason why the skeletal old man wanted to kill Du Xiaofu from the beginning and not let him help him. However, in comparison, the shadow of the blood-flame divine lotus was much dimmer. After all, most of the power had struck its body, and it was precisely because of this that the blood-flame divine lotus was furious. After trembling for a while, it suddenly erupted with an even more terrifying power, brazenly suppressing the skeletal old man. "Brat, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and attack with all your might. What about the law of thunder? Why aren't you using it?" The skeletal old man hurriedly shouted, resisting the boundless pressure. "Hegemonic sword way. Heavenly thunder punishment. 8 desolation thunder. God-binding grip." Du Xiaofu also knew that the situation was critical, and a series of attacks were launched. The sword light was mixed with thunder and brought along a terrifying spatial storm. It swept through the air as if it was about to destroy the world, continuously rushing into the void crack. After these attacks were launched, they appeared around the blood-flame divine lotus one after another. All of them hit its body, and not a single one was dodged. "Qi, the shadow of the blood flame divine lotus trembled violently, and the light it emitted gradually dimmed. Its aura was weakening, and the power it displayed was also decreasing. I really have a chance to refine it. Du Xiaofu was pleasantly surprised, and his attacks did not stop. Heavenly Thunder Absolute Destruction, Heavenly Fire Dual-Person Destruction, Earth Swamp Lu Hexagram Destruction, Earth Fire Bright Destruction. In the end, Du Xiaofu even summoned the Void 8 trigrams. The Void 8 trigrams that had been supported by the Thunder Martial Vein were brilliant and terrifying. Every time it hit the shadow of the Blood Flame Divine Lotus, it would shake incessantly, as if it was about to collapse. The more Du Xiaofu fought, the more excited he became. The aura of the Blood Flame Divine Lotus was getting weaker and weaker, which meant that the chances of refining it were greater. Boy, I can't hold on any longer. Seize the opportunity to refine the true spirit of the Blood Flame Divine Lotus. Quick, don't delay. If you delay too long and he recovers a little bit of his strength, there will be no turning back. The skeletal old man's voice was extremely weak, as if he was struggling at death's door. In fact, when he controlled Du Xiaofu to attack, the old man himself had also suffered significant injuries. Earlier, he had been severely injured by the joint attack of Du Xiaofu and the Blood Flame Divine Lotus. Now that he had been attacked again and again, his injuries were even more serious. He really did not have the strength to deal with the Blood Flame Divine Lotus, so he could only rely on the boy. Okay, Du Xiaofu agreed, and his figure suddenly moved, pouncing straight at the shadow of the Blood Flame Divine Lotus. In the process of moving forward, the Redbone Horse Monkey's primordial spirit rushed out of his body and directly disintegrated, turning into a large area of throbbing lightning that wrapped around the true spirit of the Blood Flame Divine Lotus. Human, if you dare refine me, I will make sure you die a horrible death. At this time, the Blood Flame Divine Lotus finally opened its mouth to speak, letting out a sharp shriek. A powerful force fluctuated, constantly struggling, trying to break free from the restraints of Du Xiaofu's thunder force. I helped you deal with that old man out of kindness, but you didn't want to let me go. You even wanted to use the fire attribute law to refine me into the purest energy. You really deserve to die 10,000 times, Du Xiaofu said. Responding to the true spirit of the Blood Flame Divine Lotus, you asked for it. If you let me go, the winner would have been you. Unfortunately, you missed the opportunity. Don't expect me to be merciful. Du Xiaofu snorted coldly, and the power of his primordial spirit moved fiercely, carrying with it a domineering force. In the surging sea of lightning, the primordial spirit of the Blood Flame Divine Lotus emitted a dazzling light, condensing into a huge net of light that tightly imprisoned the true spirit of the Blood Flame Divine Lotus. At this point, although the remaining power of the Blood Flame Divine Lotus was still extremely vast, it could no longer compare to Du Xiaofu. It was firmly suppressed, and it was completely unable to put up any effective resistance. Ah, human, I will kill you. The Blood Flame Divine Lotus roared again and again, its sharp voice piercing the eardrums, stunning those who heard it. It struggled with all its might, but it was all in vain. Slowly, streaks of lightning like tiny snakes burrowed into the huge shadow of the Blood Flame Divine Lotus. This scene looked like Du Xiaofu's lightning martial vein taking root in a Blood Flame Divine Lotus. It was incomparably bizarre. After that, the Blood Flame Divine Lotus's struggle quickly weakened, and it had even less strength to contend with Du Xiaofu. You'd better be honest. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for repaying kindness with ingratitude. You deserve to be struck by lightning. Du Xiaofu snorted coldly as he controlled balls of lightning, constantly stabbing them into the shadow of the Blood Flame Divine Lotus, and finally occupying it completely. As time passed, the Blood Flame Divine Lotus finally quieted down, completely losing the power to resist. The shadow was completely filled with Du Xiaofu's power of lightning. Moreover, during this process, Du Xiaofu did not expend much strength. Even when he suppressed the Blood Flame Divine Lotus true spirit, he still retained a lot of strength. Begin refining. Du Xiaofu suppressed the excitement in his heart and prepared to refine the Blood Flame Divine Lotus true spirit. But at the same time, He also kept an eye out to guard against the skeletal old man's tricks. The temptation of the blood-flame divine lotus was huge. If he was ambushed at a critical moment, he would fall all the way to his grandmother's house. However, Du Xiaofu was not too worried. The skeletal old man's weakness did not seem to be faked. In the process of fighting with the blood-flame divine lotus, although he had put in a lot of effort, he had mainly relied on the old man to fight to that extent. In this way, Du Xiaofu could relax a little and wholeheartedly refine the blood-flame divine lotus. Chapter 2709. In the lava space, Du Xiaofu controlled the power of lightning and pulled the true spirit of the blood-fire divine lotus into his body. Then, he sat cross-legged in the air and entered a mysterious state, beginning to refine it with all his might. The surroundings were still filled with endless fire, and every inch of space was unbearably hot. The skeletal old man's breath was weak, and he was almost at his last gasp. He did not disturb Du Xiaofu. The light on the skeleton dimmed, and he sat cross-legged in the air, meditating to recover his strength. His physical body had suffered great injuries, and the power of his soul was close to withering. If he continued to struggle, he might die at any time. The lava space fell into silence, and there were no more battles. If not for the fact that Du Xiaofu needed to refine the true spirit of the blood-fire divine lotus, he would probably be very happy to raise the purple-gold heavenly tower and give the skeletal old man a blow to prevent future trouble. Time gradually passed under such circumstances, constantly passing by. Outside the cave, He Jibai and the others had already waited for almost 2 days, but they still had not left. Young master, this restriction seems to have weakened quite a bit. Should we go down and take a look? Beside He Jibai, one of his subordinates suddenly spoke with joy. In fact, it was not just him. The others had also discovered this. They all discovered that the spatial barrier that had blocked their footsteps and isolated their Yuan spirit's power was rippling at this moment. Under the probing of their soul power, it actually no longer had the effect of blocking probing. This made them overjoyed. Everyone who came here wanted to obtain an opportunity, and the temptation of the blood-fire divine lotus could not be said to be small. However, they also knew very well that the purple-robed young man had already gone down, and this change was definitely related to him. They just did not know what kind of state that person was in right now. If we go down now, we might have a chance to snatch the opportunity from him. Among the other 4, one of them flushed red, seeming rather excited. That purple-robed young man is not to be trifled with. If he's fine, won't we be asking for trouble if we go down? However, from the brilliance in his eyes, it could be seen that he was very tempted as well. Opportunities are always accompanied by dangers. In the face of benefits, there seems to be no reason for us to retreat. Another person spoke up, rubbing his palms together. The 4 of them could not suppress their excitement. Their bodies slowly descended, and they began to gather their strength. They wanted to break the barrier beneath their feet and enter the cave. However, just as they were about to move, He Jibai's voice was heard. "Let's wait here. I'm afraid it won't be long before he comes out. The way I see it, that blood flame divine lotus is extraordinary. It's not an ordinary object. It's very likely that it has cultivated for countless years and is peerlessly powerful. Now that he had obtained it, he should be able to obtain great benefits. When the time comes, I'll also have a good look. Divine General Zihong's mansion would like to get to know such an outstanding young man." He Jibai chuckled. His words were not only for his 2 followers, but also for the other 4 powerhouses to hear. Among those present, he was the most powerful. To a certain extent, his will could determine the actions of others. In fact, He Jibai wanted to make friends with Du Xiaofu and did not want others to disturb him. Therefore, he was willing to play the role of a guardian and do something for the purple-robed young man. As expected, once he said that, the other 4 people's faces changed. They tried their best to hide their excitement and did not dare to act rashly. He had even used the name of Divine General Zihong's mansion. His intention was obvious. He wanted to intimidate everyone present. "Since young master he has said so, we'll wait here," one of the 4 said with a hollow laugh as he took a few steps back. They had all heard of Divine General Zihong's mansion. It was comparable to Dai Xuanzi's Great Void Divine General's mansion. In the entire Yuqing Holy Kingdom, both of them were colossal existences. They were extremely powerful. Although the four of them had their own backgrounds, they did not have the guts to challenge the top forces of the Holy Kingdom. They were not qualified to do so. Just like that, although the space barrier above the cave entrance had weakened a lot, under He Jibai's watch, no one dared to cross the barrier and enter the cave. The seven of them waited quietly. At the same time, they stared at the changes below without blinking. They even unleashed the power of their respective primordial spirits to investigate the situation inside. However, under the obstruction of the endless flames, they could not pry into Du Xiaofu's specific situation. Huff, 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 Du Xiaofu, who was sitting with his eyes closed, suddenly burst into a blazing flame and burned fiercely. At this moment, such a flame did not cause him any harm. Instead, it added to his power. In his mind, the blood-flame divine lotus true spirit was constantly being refined. The blood-red lotus phantom exuded a strange pattern, like the winding veins of a plant. Du Xiaofu gained a lot of understanding from the most profound pattern. This understanding was something he had never had before. To spiritual beings of heaven and earth, they were born with some kind of dharma and logos of the vast thousand worlds. This was especially so for existences like the bloody lotus, which interpreted the most perfect and profound dharma. Many years ago, Du Xiaofu had continuously comprehended runes from Du Xiaoyao. From there, he cultivated the primordial spirit of the redbone horse monkey and obtained the uniqueness of the redbone horse monkey. Now, with the help of the bloody lotus real spirit, he quickly grasped some dharma of the fire element. This made him very happy. The great Tao is boundless, and all dharma returns to its origin. All the dharma of heaven and earth have their own paths. At the same time, there is a certain connection between them. They cannot exist independently. As Du Xiaofu comprehended, he kept thinking in his heart. After gaining control of the heavenly Tao, he had a deeper understanding of the vast thousand worlds. At this time, he comprehended some dharma of the fire element, which allowed him to see a wider world. However, there were still some questions that puzzled him, and he could not understand them. Chi chi chi. Bright flames jumped around Du Xiaofu's body, making him look like a fierce flaming man, exuding a terrifying temperature. The heavenly thunder can trigger the earthly fire. The lightning element can trigger the power of the divine fire. Du Xiaofu was deep in thought. With a thought, a huge thunderbolt appeared out of thin air and bombarded the void. Immediately after, a flame suddenly jumped up from the place where the thunderbolt struck. This was the power of the fire element triggered by the heavenly thunder. If the lightning element and the fire element are used together, won't the power be even more terrifying? Du Xiaofu continued to think. In the sky above his head, bolts of divine thunder were entrenched and crackling, carrying with them the power to destroy the world. In the next moment, under the situation where the heavenly thunder did not strike, a ball of bright fire was ignited under his feet. It spread out in the void and burned fiercely. The lightning element and the divine fire complemented each other, releasing an extremely terrifying aura. Under Du Xiaofu's control, the heavenly thunder and the earthly fire moved at the same time. Two tiny strands of power gently swept out and struck the void not far away. Crack! Under the combined attack of the lightning element and the fire element, the void suddenly cracked and there was a burnt smell. Du Xiaofu had already opened his eyes. When he saw this scene, he could not help but be shocked. Under his control, the lightning element and the fire element were very weak, but he did not expect them to have such a huge effect. This discovery made him extremely excited. Why does it have such great power? Du Xiaofu was very confused. He wanted to know the specific reason, but he could not figure it out. When he was in the Xinwu world, he was already the strongest person in the world. He did not know anything about the path of cultivation after that. When he just arrived at the 33 skies, he did not have the time to learn more before he was chased here by the house of vertical and horizontal. He was also separated from the tomboy, Du Xiaoyao, and the three little ones. The heavenly thunder, the earthly fire. What if I try this? Du Xiaofu thought for a while. Suddenly, His face was full of excitement as a magical idea popped into his mind. As soon as he thought of it, he softly shouted, "Void 8 trigrams, rise!" Whoosh! The moment he spoke, a gigantic 8 trigrams appeared above Du Xiaofu's head. A wave of terrifying pressure suddenly descended and filled up every inch of space. Below this 8 trigrams, bolts of lightning appeared and rampaged. The terrifying roar of thunder shook the area and displayed a terrifying might. It was like the roar of a demon. Under Du Xiaofu's feet, flames rose and burned. It was like the fire of hell that could burn everything in the world. In the next moment, a fierce wind howled and howled in all directions, causing the entire space to tremble. In addition, mountains and rivers appeared out of thin air, as if they could suppress everything in the world. They emitted a heavy aura and lay dormant under Du Xiaofu's feet. At the same time, the sound of waves echoed. A lake and sea appeared, and the waves moved the sky. Heaven, earth, thunder, wind, water, fire, mountain, lake. So the Void 8 trigrams hid so many transformations of laws. In the past, I only thought of it as a kind of divine ability, but I never studied the Tao of transformations within it too deeply. It's as if everything in the world is played out in the Void 8 trigrams. Du Xiaofu could not help but shout. He felt quite shocked. The Void 8 trigrams was something he comprehended in the divine dominion. It was a technique left behind by the ruler of the 3,000 worlds. In the past, Du Xiaofu relied on it to fight countless powerful enemies. Although he had been constantly comprehending the essence of it, he had never looked at it from an outside perspective. He had fallen into some kind of shackle. At this moment, after the inspiration of the heavenly thunder and earth fire surged, Du Xiaofu felt as if he had been enlightened. Qian, Han, Sun, Zhan, Kan, Li, Jin, and Jing respectively represented the principles of the profundities of heaven, earth, lightning, wind, water, fire, mountain, and lake. All the changes in the world seemed to be completely explained within this diagram, and it was extremely miraculous. And as long as one mastered the most basic principle, one could trigger the other true meanings and condense them into a terrifying attack. Du Xiaofu could not help but sigh. The means of the ruler of the 3,000 worlds was far from what he could imagine. The strongest part of the Void 8 trigrams is its endless transformations. Any combination of different forces can form the most terrifying attack. If I can fully comprehend all the principles contained in it, then when I use the Void 8 trigrams, how powerful will it be? Thinking of this, Du Xiaofu couldn't hold it in any longer, and a sense of urgency rose in his heart. Just thinking about it made him feel excited and wanted to give it a try. However, he only had a certain level of attainment in the law of thunder and fire. He was confused in other aspects and was far from being able to try according to his idea. It seems that the law of space is not included in the Void 8 trigrams. Du Xiaofu frowned slightly and thought to himself. Among the many true meanings of the Void 8 trigrams, there did not seem to be any law of space. They were all laws of substance. However, as soon as this thought arose, it was dismissed by Du Xiaofu. He shook his head and muttered to himself, "Heaven and earth, which is heaven and earth? Doesn't it represent the most fundamental and vast power of space?" Du Xiaofu understood this point in his heart, but he had a feeling of helplessness. Heaven and earth were too vast and mighty. The law of space that he had mastered was not enough. It was impossible for him to comprehend the deepest true meaning. Forget it. I'll slowly comprehend the Void 8 trigrams in the future. It would be best if I could deduce some of my own methods. Du Xiaofu no longer thought about it, but he secretly made up his mind to comprehend more of the profound truths of the Void 8 trigrams. In the 33 heavens, many of the martial skills he had learned before were extremely backward. When facing enemies, it was easy for him to fall into a passive situation when facing opponents of the same level. After grasping some of the law of fire, Du Xiaofu decided to deduce his own methods. The foundation for all of this was to slowly evolve from the various methods he had learned in the past. Refining the blood flame divine lotus is almost complete. Du Xiaofu's eyes flickered as he thought to himself. In his mind's Niwen palace, The blood flame divine lotus true spirit was completely under his control, and he could use the true meaning of the laws engraved on it. At the same time, on the law brand in his mind, other than the part that explained the law of lightning and the law of space, more lines lit up. They represented the law of fire, but like the law of space, they were far from being complete. It could be said that Du Xiaofu could borrow the strength of the blood flame divine lotus true spirit to mobilize the profound laws of fire, but he was still far from being able to grasp the complete laws of fire. How is that old thing doing? Du Xiaofu let out a long sigh and then walked around, passing through the flames that filled the sky. Soon, he arrived at the flaming skeleton's side. At this time, the skeletal old man was still sitting cross-legged in the void, constantly adjusting his breathing as he tried to restore some of his strength. This old fellow must have been a heaven-defying powerhouse in the past, but now, the corners of Du Xiaofu's mouth curled up into a sinister smile. Looking at the skeleton, his eyes revealed a malicious glint. Being stared at like this, the flaming skeleton couldn't help but shudder as if it was shuddering. "Stinking brat, what are you doing?" The skeletal old man slowly woke up. His hollow eye sockets immediately stared at Du Xiaofu as he asked in a threatening manner. He felt a chill run down his spine. This was the funniest thing in the world. As a fire attribute master, he actually felt cold. The old man knew that the root of all this was the purple-robed youth. Perhaps this purple-robed youth was plotting some evil scheme. "Old thing, what goes around comes around. You're going to fall into my hands now, aren't you?" Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows and smiled at the flaming skeleton, feeling indescribably carefree. "Boy, what the hell are you smiling about?" The old man cursed, his skeletal jaw opening and closing. It was an indescribably strange sight. "Old thing, it was you who wanted to kill me before. Now it's my turn. However, I'm a benevolent person, so I won't kill you. As long as you hand over the main body of the blood flame divine lotus and let me beat you up, I'll be satisfied and leave here," Du Xiaofu said with a smile as he approached the skeletal old man step by step. He had refined the blood flame divine lotus true spirit, so it was equivalent to a cultivator's soul. As for the main body of the blood flame divine lotus, it had already been refined by the skeletal old man. Du Xiaofu didn't want to let go of such a great benefit. If he could obtain the main body of the blood flame divine lotus, he would have one more method at his disposal. "Stinking brat, you're still trying to act innocent after taking advantage of me? If it weren't for the fact that I'm in urgent need of recovery and don't have time to waste with you, I would have directly slapped you. Now get the hell out of here, or don't blame me for being impolite." The old man immediately cursed. He pointed a bony claw that had lost its flesh above his head, indicating that Du Xiaofu should leave quickly. At the same time, a burst of dazzling flames rose from his skeleton, leaping and releasing a terrifying power, causing the temperature in the space to rise by another level. He was furious. This brat was not satisfied with obtaining the blood flame divine lotus true spirit. He actually had the idea of snatching the main body of the blood flame divine lotus from his hands. That wasn't all. He actually said that he wanted to give him a good beating. That was intolerable. "You're still bluffing with me at this time. Do you think I'm scared? If you have the ability, then slap me to death. If you don't have the ability, then obediently hand over the main body of the blood flame divine lotus today. Otherwise, don't blame me for tearing down your bones one by one and using them as firewood." Du Xiaofu couldn't stop laughing. He didn't stop moving forward because of the old man's threat. As he walked, he soon arrived in front of the old man. Chapter 27:10. Translator. H2DH2 Mr. Du Xiaofu was not afraid of the skeletal old man. Perhaps when he had first entered this place, he was indeed no match for the old man and could only passively take a beating. But now, after fighting with the blood fire lotus, the old man's strength had been weakened to the extreme. He believed that as long as he attacked with all his strength, this skeleton would not have much power to resist and could only be trampled on by him. Thinking of this, Du Xiaofu felt an indescribable joy in his heart. On one hand, he had a chance to obtain the blood fire lotus main body. On the other hand, he could beat this old man up and avenge his previous hatred. Why wouldn't he do such a good thing? Fuck you. Fourth uncle and granny. How dare you speak to an old man like this? Brat, you don't know how the word death is written, do you? The skeletal old man continued to curse. He was indeed bluffing. Otherwise, how could he allow this brat to jump around so impudently in front of him? He wanted nothing more than to jump up and pick up this detestable brat in front of him to give him a good beating. Unfortunately, this purple-robed brat had guessed correctly. His strength had been weakened to the extreme. It was difficult for him to even move vigorously, let alone fight. The old man could only pretend to be furious in an attempt to scare Du Xiaofu. Unexpectedly, the other party did not fall for his trick at all, and was determined to obtain the Bloodfire Lotus main body. At this moment, the skeletal old man was worried. He did not know what to do at all. You still dare to scold me at a time like this? Looks like you really don't want these old bones anymore. Du Xiaofu grinned and raised a palm. Purple gold light lingered on it as he slammed it down viciously at the flaming skeleton. He was not afraid that this fellow would be killed by him in an instant. This old man's life was very tough. He had been here for tens of thousands of years and still had not died. He definitely had some tricks up his sleeve to deal with this attack. When Du Xiaofu's palm slammed down, it turned into a resplendent palm of light. It slammed down with the power to crush everything and ruthlessly imprinted itself on the skeletal old man's body, turning him into ashes in an instant. However, Du Xiaofu knew that this attack had missed. It did not hit the skeletal old man. The other party was a powerhouse who had a very deep grasp of the law of space. He wouldn't be hit so easily. You are indeed a cunning old fox. You said that you wanted to kill me before, but now you are running faster than a fox. Du Xiaofu curled his lips and mocked. In his eyes, the skeletal figure of the old man appeared in the distance. His empty eye sockets were fiercely staring at him, spewing out raging flames of anger. But very quickly, the flame was extinguished and was helplessly restrained by the old man. Kid, how about we talk about the conditions? Seeing Du Xiaofu approach again, the old man waved his hand and hurriedly said, You've already become like this. What other conditions do you have to exchange with me? Du Xiaofu did not stop. He looked around and said, After being here for tens of thousands of years, your Chinkuan bag must have been burned to ashes long ago. You don't have any treasures left. What other treasures can you take out to negotiate with me? If you tell me to go with you to your family, sect, or other places and promise me benefits, do you think I will believe you? We are already like this now. I am afraid that after entering your lair, I will really be slapped to pieces. Whatever enmity or grudge, it was better to settle it here. Exchanging the body of the blood flame divine lotus for your life. This deal seems to be a good deal for you. As Du Xiaofu spoke, he arrived beside the old man again and slammed his palm down again. This time, he had already activated the law of space and firmly bound the surroundings. Perhaps with the old man's means, he could easily escape another attack. But Du Xiaofu believed that if he continued to attack like this, the old man would become weaker and weaker until he no longer had the strength to dodge. At that time, wouldn't everything be under his control? Kid, don't be anxious. The old man hurriedly shouted, hating that he could not speak out his thoughts in one breath. Kid, this old man can't give you the blood flame divine lotus. I have already merged with it. If I give it to you, this old man will lose his life immediately. Why don't you become my disciple? As this old man's disciple, I can give you a lot of benefits. I see that your attainments in the law of space are not weak, and this old man's attainments in this aspect are countless times higher than yours. If you have me to teach you, you can improve your strength very quickly. This way, neither of us will lose out. Kid, what do you think of this idea? Hey, kid, don't be anxious. I haven't finished yet. Quickly stop. Du Xiaofu didn't care about what the skeletal old man said. He went up and slapped him. After the old man used the law of space to escape, Du Xiaofu also used the Fuyao style. Like a shadow, he appeared in front of the old man in a blink of an eye and slapped that skeleton again. The old man cried out anxiously and could only hurriedly dodge again and again. He was completely unable to attack Du Xiaofu. His strength was rapidly depleting. If this continued, it would not be long before he could only die. Old man, Hand over the blood flame divine lotus and apologize to me. I will consider sparing your life." Du Xiaofu shouted and chased after the old man. He did not use any tyrannical means. He just raised his palm again and again and slapped it down again and again. He knew that he could not hit the old man and was happy to preserve his strength. In the end, Du Xiaofu simply stood in the same place and did not move. The moment the old man appeared from the space, Du Xiaofu greeted him with a thunderbolt and slashed down. He was so shocked that he hurriedly dodged. This old man is really 8 lifetimes of bad luck. How did I meet such a pain in the ass like you? The old man's heart was filled with unspeakable bitterness and said, "But I really can't give you the blood flame divine lotus. Otherwise, this old man will be dead." He could also see that Du Xiaofu did not have the intention to kill him. Otherwise, the other party would have gone all out, and he would have been exhausted by now. "You old thing want to kill me? Don't tell me you are so naive to think that I will care about your life and death." Du Xiaofu snorted lightly and still unhurriedly summoned thunderbolts and slashed down, forcing the old man to be in a difficult situation. However, it was at this moment that something unexpected happened. Both of them heard a loud boom, and then endless stones fell from the sky and smashed into the sea of flames. However, they were all burned into smoke in an instant and slowly dissipated. However, this movement attracted the attention of both of them at the same time. Du Xiaofu and the skeletal old man stopped at the same time and looked up in the direction of the cave entrance. "Boy, someone is coming. Let this old man hide," the skeletal old man said hurriedly. Immediately, he was no longer afraid of Du Xiaofu and flew directly to his side. "Old man, why are you hiding? Could it be your enemy?" Du Xiaofu turned his eyes and looked at him suspiciously and asked, "You goddamn brat. In this old man's current state, as long as he has some strength, he can be a threat to me. And I have the original body of the Bloodfire Divine Lotus. No matter who sees it, they won't let it go easily." The skeletal old man was anxious. He grabbed Du Xiaofu and hurriedly asked, "Boy, do you have the law of space? Let this old man go in and hide. If someone sees the original body of the Bloodfire Divine Lotus, you may not be able to get it in the end." Du Xiaofu was speechless. He had to admit that what the old man said was very reasonable. If the person who came was too strong, it was really possible that he would lose the original body of the Bloodfire Divine Lotus. And the reason why the old man sought his protection was to save his life. He did not hesitate and quickly opened a gap in the ancient, desolate space and appeared in the void. What a powerful space technique. It seems to contain the law of time. What an amazing treasure. From the aura fluctuating from the ancient, desolate space, the old man immediately understood the mystery of it and could not help but cry out in surprise. The law of space and the law of time. These two supreme powers fused together. Even with the skeletal old man's strength, he felt very frightened. He glanced at the purple-robed youth in front of him seriously. In an instant, countless thoughts turned in his mind. It seemed that this young man's background was not small at all. "Old thing, what are you still in a daze for? Hurry up and go in." Du Xiaofu glared fiercely at him and scolded. "Go in." The skeletal old man recovered from his daze. His figure flashed, and he drilled into the ancient, desolate space. Following that, an endless amount of flame energy was also brought in. Immediately after, the lava space recovered its clarity. The initial scene appeared. Everything could be observed with the naked eye. Under Du Xiaofu's feet was surging magma, emitting flames as it jumped. In the blazing magma, there were a few green lotus leaves floating, rising and falling with the rolling magma. Du Xiaofu was not anxious. He waved out a light palm, picked it up, and put it in his Qinkuan bag. "Who is it?" After Du Xiaofu put away the ancient desolate space, he looked up and could see that there were more than 10 figures at the entrance of the cave. He Jibai and 6 other people were there. In addition, there were some unfamiliar faces. At this time, the restriction barrier at the entrance of the cave had already disappeared. It was blown away by a blow. The surrounding boulders were shaken and fell one after another, smashing into the magma and splashing a large amount of sparks. The changes in the lava space also attracted the attention of the people above. "Brother, you finally appeared," Seeing Du Xiaofu appear, He Jibai said with some joy. Then, he quickly descended with his followers and stood beside Du Xiaofu. You're injured? Du Xiaofu saw that He Jibai was holding his chest with one hand, and his breathing was a little hurried. There was also a scarlet trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. To be able to injure a young expert at the peak of the complete void returning stage, the cultivation of the person who came was definitely not ordinary. However, Du Xiaofu didn't think too much about it. He didn't have much of a relationship with He Jibai. Even though He Jibai looked too much like Qingguyu, Du Xiaofu didn't plan to get involved as long as those people didn't provoke him. I'm fine, it's just a small injury. He Jibai smiled lightly and raised his sleeve to wipe away the blood at the corner of his mouth. However, when he looked up at the brocade-robed young man, he could not help but show a look of fear in his eyes. And this scene was caught by Du Xiaofu. It was obvious that the person who injured him was the brocade-robed young man. Can the people of the Great Void Divine General's estate be lawless? You even dare to injure our young master. Do you really think you can cover the sky with one hand? Behind He Jibai, a follower looked up at the sky and roared with righteous indignation. Du Xiaofu couldn't help but be stunned when he heard this, and he raised his eyes to look over again. Could it be that the brocade-robed young man is from the Great Void Divine General's estate, which is Dai Xuanzi's family? I haven't left yet, and the other party has already come knocking on my door? He Jibai, I didn't want to attack you, but you want to protect that kid, so don't blame me for not showing mercy to the Great Void Divine General's estate. At this moment, the brocade-robed young man came down from the sky and stood in front of He Jibai and Du Xiaofu as he snorted. Such a sentence stunned Du Xiaofu again. He Jibai actually provoked the brocade-robed young man to attack him in order to protect him? He was not even close to him. So why did he do this? Brother, you must be joking. I just thought you looked kind and wanted to make another friend. Perhaps my strength is far inferior to yours, but I still want to be thick-skinned and make friends with you. He Jibai said his intention directly and did not hide it at all. This, Du Xiaofu was stunned, and he had a good impression of He Jibai. He cupped his hands and said, Thank you, young master He. I can't thank you enough. But now is not the time to talk. Let me solve the problem here first. He thought for a while and roughly understood what was going on. After Dai Xuanzi suffered a loss at his hands, he must have found other people from the Great Void Divine General's estate to seek revenge. But at that time, he was refining the Blood Flame Divine Lotus, and He Jibai was afraid that the other party would disturb him, so he stopped him. But the other party did not give He Jibai or the Great Void Divine General's estate any face, and directly injured He Jibai. Du Xiaofu had no intention of retreating from the trouble that came knocking on his door. Those who entered this special space were all experts of the younger generation, and most of them were not a threat to him. He had already observed that no matter how strong the brocade-robed young man was, he was only at the same level as little Xingxing, and was not a match for him. Brat, are you the one who injured my third brother? Seeing that He Jibai was talking to Du Xiaofu, the brocade-robed young man pointed his finger at Du Xiaofu's nose and asked arrogantly. His eyes revealed a fierce light, and his slanted eyebrows flew into his hair, adding to his heroic spirit. His black hair was casually scattered, like a willow tree, and moved without wind. I don't know who your third brother is, but 2 days ago, I did teach a fool with a nose on his head a lesson. Speaking of which, you don't look like him. How can you be brothers? Are you not born to the same mother? Or are you not born to the same father? Du Xiaofu touched his chin and put on a very serious look. He kept looking at the brocade-robed young man, and at the same time, he kept talking. But as soon as he said that, the brocade-robed young man's face turned purple. Little bastard, do you want to die? The brocade-robed young man was furious. His long hair stood up, and he looked like a furious lion. His fierce eyes were opened wide like copper bells, and it was indescribably terrifying. Du Xiaofu's words made the brocade-robed young man go crazy. The two brothers did not look alike, and it was not a big problem to say that they were not born to the same mother. But to say that they were not born to the same father, there was a lot of content involved. It could lead to a lot of stories, and it would cause people to have endless fanciful thoughts and endless aftertaste. This guy's mouth is really vicious. Beside Du Xiaofu, He Jibai's mouth twitched, and his eyes were about to pop out. Not only him, but even the few followers beside him also felt boundless respect for the purple-robed young man beside him. This guy was too awesome. He dared to ridicule the people of the Divine General's residence. Everyone knew that in the Yuqing Divine Kingdom, the purple-robed young man was an absolutely powerful existence. Even the Zihong Divine General's residence did not dare to provoke him so brazenly. It could be said that the hatred between the purple-robed young man and the Divine General's residence was getting deeper, and it would be difficult to resolve. Although He Jibai and the others could not help but worry for Du Xiaofu, they could not help but give him a thumbs up in their hearts. Brother, this is the second young master of the Divine General's residence, Dai Xuanzi's second brother. His name is Dai Xianming. He's much stronger than Dai Xuanzi and has truly stepped into the seizing divinity stage. You have to be careful. Seeing that the brocade-robed young man had gone crazy, He Jibai gently turned his head and transmitted his voice to Du Xiaofu. I know, Du Xiaofu replied, and then looked at the brocade-robed young man called Dai Xianming. He rolled his eyes and said, You get angry so easily? It seems that I was right. But then again, you and Dai Xuanzi are not born from the same father, but your characters are somewhat similar. You are both so stupid. Little bastard, how dare you speak without thinking? Today, I will tear you into pieces, Dai Xianming shouted. His fierce eyes looked as if he could not wait to tear Du Xiaofu into pieces. He had never been insulted like this, and he had never been pointed at and scolded like this. Dai Xianming, who had grown up under the protection of many people, could not tolerate people saying that his father was a cuckold and saying that he was stupid. Boy, as long as you are alive, the Divine General's residence will hunt you down to the ends of the earth. Beside Dai Xianming, there were also people from the Divine General's residence who shouted furiously. They could not wait to pounce on the purple-robed young man and tear him into pieces, but these people knew that they were far from being a match for him. No, today, he will definitely die, Dai Xianming shouted with hatred. He then took a big step forward and attacked Du Xiaofu. Chapter 27:11. Dai Xianming's strength was not weak at all. Others might not know, but He Jibai did. It could be said that in the entire Yuqing Divine Kingdom, there were only a few people of the same generation who could defeat him. He Jibai began to worry when he saw Dai Xianming pouncing straight at Du Xiaofu. Although he had seen Du Xiaofu's strength, he did not think that he could be stronger than Dai Xianming. All of you, step back. Let me deal with this arrogant bastard first. Du Xiaofu let out a cold snort. An imposing aura rose from his body as he pushed He Jibai and his subordinates out. Then, the purple-gold heavenly tower appeared in his hand, swallowing and spitting out purple-gold light. Opposite Du Xiaofu, Dai Xianming's black hair danced wildly. He was like an unparalleled demon god, waving his fists in the void. Under the operation of the vast qi, they quickly converged and condensed. The fluctuation of the law of water was the same as Dai Xuanzi's. Soon, it condensed into a huge water fist. Dense runes revolved on it, explaining the true meaning of the law of water, releasing an aura that was both soft and hard. Du Xiaofu's eyes twitched. He could feel the unparalleled power on this fist. Even though it didn't look violent, it definitely contained an extremely ferocious force. I've just mastered some of the law of fire. This is the perfect time to test its power. Du Xiaofu's heart sank as he quickly made his move. In his mind, some of the patterns on the law of fire emitted a blazing light. Following that, a raging fire suddenly rose from Du Xiaofu's body, making him look like he was burning. In his hand, the purple-gold heavenly tower buzzed incessantly. Under the effect of the law of fire, it turned red as if it was being calcined. It was so red that it was transparent. Go to hell, kid, Dai Xianming roared, waving his sparkling water fist, and brazenly moved. The space was trembling violently, and the entire lava space was shaking uncontrollably. Large pieces of rubble rolled down from above. Someone like you dares to say that you want me to die? On the other hand, those who provoke me don't have a good ending. Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows and said disdainfully. He swung his sword down vertically, and the void was easily sliced apart by the scorching purple-gold heavenly tower like a piece of tofu. Silently, a hideous crack appeared, emitting a scorching aura. Along with it, a burnt smell spread through the space. It was in such a scene that the broadsword in Du Xiaofu's hand collided with Dai Xuanming's glowing fist in an instant. Well, it was as if a piece of red-hot iron had been thrown into clear water. It was extremely ear-piercing. After the broadsword and the water fist met, there wasn't much of a commotion. As soon as the two opposing forces came into contact, they began to devour each other, consuming each other's energy. The huge water fist emitted a scorching mist that rose densely in the air like a haze. The flames on the broadsword in Du Xiaofu's hand also rapidly weakened, and soon became dull. Just as the purple-gold heavenly tower completely recovered its original appearance, Dai Xuanming's water fist had already been split into two halves. Du Xiaofu softly acknowledged. He discovered that the fist that he had split apart didn't lose any momentum. After splitting into two halves, it still continued to bombard him. Such a scene couldn't help but cause his eyes to twitch. Everything in the world contains the 5 elements, and the principles of the 5 elements reinforce and restrain each other. Water restrains fire. This is the law of nature. The water attribute law that Dai Ximing has grasped is already not weak. I'm afraid that he is not far from the true perfection realm. I have just grasped some fire attribute law, and it's not enough to fight against him. What's more, when the two met, I was the one who was naturally restrained. Du Xiaofu kept thinking in his heart, and he knew the essential reason. He didn't find it strange that he was at a disadvantage. If he used the lightning attribute law or the space attribute law, he could easily defeat Dai Ximing. While thinking in his mind, Du Xiaofu quickly responded to the two halves of the fist that were whizzing towards him. He suddenly withdrew his sword, and the purple-gold heavenly tower disappeared from his palm. In the next moment, Du Xiaofu's purple robe fluttered as if it was filled with a strong wind. Tyrannical fist way! Du Xiaofu suddenly shouted, and the magnificent qi in his body circulated. Both of his fists punched out, and it was as if two dragons were born, roaring and shaking the sky. Amidst the vast purple-gold light, Du Xiaofu's hands blasted out, and in the blink of an eye, they smashed on the two water fist prints. Boom! Boom! After the first hit, two terrifying tremors sounded in the void at the same time. Terrifying qi waves rushed in all directions, and the force swept out, sending the onlookers flying one by one. In the earth-shaking loud noise, the two water fist prints shattered and exploded into countless water droplets. They were like tiny flying stones that sputtered and carried a terrifying force. They pierced through the void, and tiny, densely packed holes appeared. It was terrifying. He Jibai and the others immediately unleashed their profound qi to protect their bodies. Otherwise, those who were slightly weaker would have been shot into a ferocious hornet's nest under such a terrifying scene. Humph! You dare to clamor with the great Void Divine General's residence with this little trick? You really don't know how to write the word death. Dai Ximing snorted coldly and looked at Du Xiaofu as he spoke. Just now, he had only used a probing attack and did not use all his strength. However, seeing that the purple-robed youth opposite him did not seem to have an easy time dealing with it, he felt that his strength was only perhaps compared to his third brother, Dai Xuanzi, and He Jibai. The purple-robed youth was indeed much stronger. However, if that was all he had, he would definitely die in front of him. Most importantly, the purple-robed youth had mastered the law of fire, which was naturally countered by him. After a few exchanges, it was not too difficult to kill the purple-robed youth. Haha! What answered Dai Ximing was Du Xiaofu's chuckle. His purple robe fluttered slightly, and he took half a step back to stabilize his body. Perhaps it was this retreat that made the purple-robed youth think that his strength was far inferior to his. Sure enough, Dai Ximing was the same as his third brother, Dai Xuanzi. They were both arrogant and conceited. Du Xiaofu didn't care. He didn't plan on displaying his full strength to begin with. Within the 33 heavens, there would be many opponents. If he were to expose all of his secrets too early, it wouldn't be a good thing. Kill! Dai Ximing shouted again, and his roar shattered the void, causing the lava space to tremble violently. On the surrounding cliffs that were scorched red, countless huge rocks peeled off and rustled down. The space seemed to be grasped by an invisible hand, shaking with all its strength. It was as if a terrible earthquake was coming and the sky was collapsing. Swoosh! In Dai Xuanming's palm, the power of the water attribute crazily condensed, and bubbles surged and bubbled. In the blink of an eye, a huge light sword was condensed. It was more than 10 feet long, and was much larger than Du Xiaofu's purple-gold heavenly tower. Strange lines glowed and flowed on the blade of the sword, and a domineering aura fluctuated, causing the entire light sword condensed from the power of the water attribute to look like the sharpest weapon in the world. The cold light was frightening. This huge light sword was held in Dai Xuanming's hand, and it began to slowly dance. Rumble. In the void, there seemed to be thunder rolling, and the terrifying sound reverberated. The space was distorted, and the lava under everyone's feet surged, like the tide of the sea, straight to the sky. Thick pillars of fire rose into the sky, and the terrifying flames burned everything in the sky. He Jibai and the others, as well as the people from the Great Void Divine General's residence who followed Dai Xianming, all rushed out of the cave at the first moment and did not dare to stay in this space. Once the purple-robed young man and Dai Xianming fought again, no one knew what kind of terrifying scene it would create. So what if you're a disciple of the Great Void Divine General's residence? Since you've provoked me, then let me teach you how to behave. Du Xiaofu shouted, and golden light covered his body, and the Dapeng golden wings flapped violently behind him. His body moved slightly, and in an instant, he disappeared from his original spot, and there was no trace of him. At the same time, the purple-robed figure appeared beside Dai Xianming, and a punch came crashing down. The law of space. This scene made Dai Xuanming's eyes widen, and he felt a little shocked. He did not expect that the purple-robed young man could use the law of space in addition to comprehending and mastering the law of fire. Moreover, from the way he appeared and disappeared unpredictably, the law of space was quite mysterious. This made Dai Xianming feel a little regretful. He had underestimated his opponent, and in an instant, his opponent had gotten close to him. Way of the overbearing fist. At this moment, Du Xiaofu's roar rang in his ears again. This loud roar was like a heavy drum, and it shook his eardrums until they were buzzing. Then, a fist that was emitting a blazing golden light, carrying a ferocious force, smashed on his chest. Puff! Dai Xianming was sent flying, and his chest caved in directly. An arrow of blood spurted out from his mouth, and it pierced through the void, forming a black hole. The figure in the brocade robe was sent flying like a kite with a broken string, and he crashed heavily into the cliff in the distance. As the stone shook, a human-shaped hole appeared, and it was dozens of feet deep. Puff! Inside the hole, Dai Xianming spat out another mouthful of blood. At this moment, he felt as if his bones and internal organs had all burst open, as if they were about to shatter. A deep pain invaded his body and went straight to his brain. The law of space of the Golden-Winged Rock Clan. What is your relationship with that clan? Dai Xuanming's eyes revealed a look of fear. He rushed out of the cave and stared at Du Xiaofu as he asked. He was indescribably shocked. He had just condensed a new attack, but he was instantly sent flying by his opponent. During this process, he did not even have time to wave the light sword in his hand to meet the attack. By the time he discovered that the purple-robed young man had appeared, it was already too late. The other party's methods, coupled with the golden wings behind him, allowed Dai Xianming to quickly guess the origin of this technique. Everyone in the 33 heavens knew about the Golden-Winged Rock Clan. It was an extremely powerful clan, and one of the top clans in the 33 heavens. Not to mention the Great Void Divine General's residence, even the Divine Emperor of the Yu Qing Divine Kingdom would not dare to provoke that clan. At this moment, seeing the purple-robed young man's methods, countless thoughts flashed through Dai Xuanming's mind. If he had a deep relationship with the Golden-Winged Rock Clan, he would have to carefully consider whether offending him was an unwise move. He stared seriously at the purple-robed young man opposite him, hoping to get an answer from him. However, to his disappointment, Du Xiaofu only responded with 4 words. It's none of your business. Such an answer made Dai Xuanming's face turn purple again. Good, good, good. I don't care where you come from or what your relationship with the Golden-Winged Rock Clan is, but as long as you're in the territory of the Yuqing Divine Kingdom, you won't be able to behave atrociously. Dai Ximing said the word good 3 times in a row and stared fiercely at Du Xiaofu without moving an inch. Although he was a little wary of the Golden-Winged Rock Clan, after all, the purple-robed young man was not a real golden-winged rock. Even if he killed him, he would not really offend that terrifying clan. Speaking of which, the Great Void belonged to the Yuqing Divine Kingdom, and it was not a place for an outsider to behave atrociously. You've said so many harsh words, but you don't have the strength to back them up. Don't you think you're digging your own grave? Du Xiaofu looked coldly at Dai Xinming, and with a flash of his body, he suddenly disappeared. The Fuyao form was activated again, and under the effect of the mysterious space order, he instantly appeared next to Dai Xinming. However, this time, the other party did not dare to be careless. Before Du Xiaofu made his move, he had already set up layers of protection around his body. Waves of water-based energy waves, like bubbles, and also like glowing armor, wrapped around the body of the young man in the brocade robe and stuck tightly to his body, forming the tightest defense. At the same time, Dai Xuanming's primordial spirit was fully activated, and he was constantly spying on Du Xiaofu's position. The moment he appeared, he waved the light sword in his hand violently and slashed to the side. However, he was still half a beat too slow, and Du Xiaofu had already taken control of the situation, and he had already made the most ferocious attack. Clown, how dare you be so arrogant? Du Xiaofu snorted coldly, and unknowingly, the purple-gold heavenly tower was in his hand again, and he shouted loudly, emptiness between heaven and earth. Lines of mysterious runes flashed and shone, and they gathered to form a vast sword radiance, which emitted an aura of destruction and slashed down fiercely. After such a sword radiance appeared, everything in the void was suppressed, and it was as if there was only this incomparably domineering sword radiance left in the world. Du Xiaofu himself was set off by the brilliant sword radiance, and he looked like a deity in the world, and his majesty was unbearable. Qi-la! The void was cut open like a piece of paper, and a long and narrow crack appeared, extending all the way to Dai Xuanming's side. The vast and peerless sword radiance swept through the crack in the void, and in the next moment, it slashed on the light sword of the young man in the brocade robe. The light sword formed by the water-based laws was cut in half at once, and it was like a piece of rotten wood, unable to withstand a single blow. However, the sword radiance in Du Xiaofu's hand did not diminish, and it directly hit Dai Xuanming's shoulder. Buzz buzz. The defensive armor on Dai Xuanming's body, under this sword radiance, made a teeth-numbing sound, and it was crying out with difficulty. Qi-la! In the end, the sword radiance burst out with unparalleled power, and the water-based armor was broken, and it slashed on Dai Xuanming's body fiercely. Poof! Blood splattered, and the sword radiance directly cut open his shoulder blade, and it only stopped halfway in, and was neutralized by the power in his body. Ah! Dai Ximing let out a miserable howl, and he was in extreme pain. However, he gritted his teeth and immediately turned around to fly backwards, wanting to get as far away from Du Xiaofu as possible. However, this time, Du Xiaofu did not continue to chase after him, but slowly raised a palm and pointed it at Dai Ximing from afar. Then, he stretched out his 5 fingers and suddenly clenched them in the void. Chi! Suddenly, there was an extremely terrifying compression force around Dai Ximing, and the space was like a piece of paper, which was instantly crushed into a ball by a huge force, and terrible wrinkles appeared. Along with it, the body of the young man in the brocade robe was also fiercely crushed into a ball, and it twisted strangely. When Du Xiaofu let go of his hand, Dai Ximing was like a weak and boneless worm, losing all support and falling from the void. This move was the god-binding grasp that Du Xiaofu had comprehended on his own, and it was a way to use the law of space. Back in Shenwu world, quite a few people had suffered from this technique. However, because Du Xiaofu's comprehension of the law of space was far from perfect, The power of this move was still a little weak compared to the law of thunder and lightning. However, as he reached the perfection of the God-seizing realm, and was only one step away from the true severing realm, the effect of the God-binding grasp was many times stronger than before. Perhaps it was not enough to use against experts who were more powerful than him, but it was easy to use against Dai Xinming at this time. Dai Xinming was not prepared, and in an instant, Dai Xinming was severely injured. I've said it before, those who provoke me will not have a good ending, and you will not be an exception. Just because you have some strength and the huge force behind you, you think you are superior to everyone, and you think that even God is inferior to you. I don't know how many rich second generations like you I have killed in my decades of cultivation. Today, let me seriously teach you how to behave. Chapter 27:12. Seeing that Dai Xinming was about to fall into the lava under his feet, Du Xiaofu did not move. He just waved a huge palm of light and grabbed the body of the young man in the brocade robe and brought him back to his side. Du Xiaofu's hand tightened around Dai Xinming's neck so that he could not move at all. In fact, although Dai Xinming was severely injured, he could still recover some of his strength if he was given some time. After all, he was a true God-seizing expert, and his main fighting method was the power of law. As long as he could recover, he would be able to fight again in no time. Of course, Du Xiaofu would not give him this opportunity. He had only been in the 33 heavens for a short time, and there were still many things that he did not understand. In addition, there were many benefits in this strange space. He did not want to stay here for long. It was better to get rid of the trouble here as soon as possible. You, what are you trying to do? Being grabbed by Du Xiaofu's hand, Dai Xinming panicked and shouted in fear. At this moment, he finally realized how wrong he was. The purple-robed young man's cultivation was too strong. He was many times stronger than him. Perhaps there were not many people in the Yuqing Divine Kingdom who could be his match. Dai Xinming's fear was like the rising tide of the sea. It quickly spread to his heart and made him feel incomparably terrified. An expert would not have too many misgivings when facing an opponent. Perhaps the purple-robed young man came from a powerful force. He did not dare to think about the golden-winged great rocks, but it was very likely that he came from one of the holy lands of the supreme Changrong heaven. Even the prince of the Yuqing Divine Kingdom could not afford to offend such a force, let alone the great Void Divine General's estate. It was obvious that the purple-robed young man would not let him go so easily. Dai Xinming's body began to tremble. Weren't you jumping around happily just now? Haven't you been clamoring to tear me to shreds? Your people from the Great Void General's residence are so arrogant. It's fine if you don't have the corresponding strength, but now you've even lost your courage. Du Xiaofu pursed his lips and narrowed his eyes. He lifted Dai Xuanzi up and flew out of the lava space. In the blink of an eye, he was out of the cave. The treasures in this space had already been obtained by him, so there was no need to keep them. Look, they're out. As soon as Du Xiaofu appeared, someone outside immediately shouted. He looked around and found that there were at least 200 to 300 people gathered in the valley. Needless to say, some of these people must have discovered the abnormality in this area one after another, and some of them must have followed Dai Xinming here to watch his battle. However, the moment Du Xiaofu appeared, the scene instantly became silent. Everyone held their breaths and didn't make a sound for a long time. However, after a short period of dead silence, the crowd suddenly exploded. It can't be. Dai Xinming was defeated and captured by the purple-robed young man. How is this possible? The second young master of the Great Void General's residence is in the seizing God realm. There aren't many opponents in the entire Yuqing Holy Kingdom who can match him. It's hard to imagine. Where did this kid come from? How did such an expert suddenly appear? It seems like no one knows him. Is there such a person in the Yuqing Holy Kingdom? That's not the point. There are people in the younger generation who can defeat Dai Xinming in the Yuqing Holy Kingdom, but it's hard to find someone who can make him so embarrassed and capture him directly. This time, the people from the Great Void General's residence are really in trouble. There must be a powerful force behind that person. His background can't be simple. Otherwise, how could he cultivate such a terrifying young expert? That's right. He can easily defeat Dai Xinming. Even in the Holy Lands, Such an expert shouldn't be considered weak, right? Many people cried out in surprise and began to discuss loudly. Many people might not have seen the three young masters of the Great Void General's residence, but their strength was well known in the entire Yuqing Holy Kingdom. They were definitely outstanding figures of the younger generation, especially the first young master and second young master of their family. Their strength had already entered the seizing god realm, and they were extremely terrifying. At that moment, Dai Shiming had been defeated just like that. Furthermore, he had been defeated in a rather miserable manner. It was an indescribable sorry state. This guy who suddenly appeared could be a peerless talent who has been hidden by some force for many years. He was only released to gain experience when the Great Void opened this time. I dare say that this will be even more exciting later on. I can't help but look forward to it. The famous young talents in the Yuqing Holy Kingdom have finally met their match. I really don't know. If the first young master of the Great Void General's residence and the others were to fight with this guy, who would win in the end? I'm afraid that he won't be weaker than the others. Although they are the most powerful guys in the Holy Kingdom, the purple-robed young man's strength doesn't seem to be weaker than any of them. If they were to fight directly, no one can tell the result. Let's not make wild guesses here. After all, that kind of realm is not something that we can understand now. We can only determine their strength after a real fight. I'm really looking forward to it. I really want to see the battle between the first young master of the Dai family and the purple-robed young man. According to my estimation, the first young master of the Great Void General's residence might be slightly stronger. For such an expert, he must have some extraordinary means. It's hard to estimate his strongest strength. Many people were discussing, and all of them were talking about Du Xiaofu and his strength. Everyone was extremely curious about this young expert who had appeared out of nowhere. They wanted to know where he came from and how he compared to the few people from the Yuqing Divine Kingdom. They wanted to know who was stronger and who was weaker. However, there were also many people who did not think highly of Du Xiaofu. The first young master of the Dai family from the Great Void General's residence had a long reputation. The young man who had suddenly appeared was indeed very strong, but he might not be a match for the first young master. Brother. Just as the crowd was discussing, Zibai could not help but feel shocked. At the same time, he was extremely happy. He wanted to make friends with Du Xiaofu. At this moment, the strength that he had displayed was more valiant than he had expected. He could not help but admire his own judgment. It was definitely not a bad thing to make friends with such an expert. The only thing that he had to worry about was the possibility of making enemies with the Great Void General's residence. However, Zibai did not care too much about this. The relationship between the Zihong Divine General's residence and the Great Void General's residence was originally mediocre. Even if he offended them, it would not be a big deal. Moreover, with the strength of the Zihong Divine General's residence, there was no need to be too afraid of them. Zibai cried out in surprise. He stepped out and went to Du Xiaofu's side. However, before he could do anything, the purple-robed young man lifted Dai Shiming up as if he was carrying a dead dog. He lifted Dai Shiming up and said, "In the world that I came from, many people called me Demon King. I will never be merciful to those who offend me. I am not afraid of the legalism, the school of famous scholars, and the school of vertical and horizontal movements of the 100 schools of thought. I believe that the strength of the Great Void General's residence should not be stronger than them. You have done something wrong, so you have to pay the corresponding price. Now it's time." As he spoke, a strong qi gushed out from Du Xiaofu's palm and entered Dai Shuaming's body. With such a method, Dai Shuaming's body produced an explosive sound like beans being fried, and the crackling sound was endless. At the same time, his body twitched and there was a series of muffled groans. Scarlet blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Ah! In the end, Dai Shiming screamed in pain. He only felt that every inch of his body had lost its strength. It was 10,000 times weaker and 10,000 times more painful than when he had endured Du Xiaofu's god-binding grip. His eyes quickly dimmed and his body seemed to be leaking air. A vast airflow rushed out and sizzled. All the strength in his body was flowing out uncontrollably. The surrounding space was changing shape under the impact of the airflow, and was pierced through time and time again. Dai Shiming knew what had happened. In an instant, he felt as if he had suffered the cruelest punishment in the world. His heart was dead. Oh no, this is bad. What a ruthless guy. He actually dared to destroy the second young master of the Great Void General's residence. This is bad. Where the hell did this person come from? He's too bold. Something big has happened. Something big has happened. The second young master of the Great Void General's residence was destroyed. This is going to break the sky. In the eyes of the crowd, Dai Xuanming's aura weakened rapidly, and he quickly became ordinary. Everyone could feel that the purple-robed young man had destroyed his cultivation and made him an ordinary person. Or rather, a useless person. Such a method caused everyone present to panic and shout incessantly. "Stop it, young man. Let go of the second young master." Among them, the people from the Great Void General's residence who came with Dai Xinming were horrified. They all roared and rushed out. They wanted to take Dai Xinming back from Du Xiaofu. Humph! Du Xiaofu snorted and ignored those people. He threw Dai Xuanming's body out and flew towards those people. Sizzle sizzle, Dai Xuanming's subordinates quickly displayed their cultivation and laid down a gentle dark qi to support Dai Xuanming's body. However, Du Xiaofu's strength was too great. In order not to hurt their master, these people were forced to retreat far away before they could stabilize themselves. Previously, I had already let Dai Xuanzi go. However, you did not know how to restrain yourself. Today, I destroyed your cultivation to teach you a lesson. At the same time, I want the rest of the people from the Great Void General's residence to know not to provoke me in the future. Otherwise, I will not be merciful next time. In the midst of the crowd's panic, Du Xiaofu's voice sounded again. His words carried a bit of sternness and incomparable firmness, making no one doubt the authenticity of his words. Du Xiaofu knew the consequences of destroying Dai Xuanming's cultivation. He was standing on the opposite side of the Great Void General's residence. However, he did not panic at all. It was as if he did not care. Furthermore, there was a reason why he did all this in front of so many people. He had just arrived at the 33 heavens and did not know much about everything here. Moreover, there were countless experts here. If he did not use his fierce and ruthless means to establish his authority here, not to mention the entire 33 heavens, even in this strange space, there would be many people who would provoke him. This time, after destroying Dai Xinming, at least he could ensure that he would not be disturbed in this space. He urgently needed time to improve his strength. Little Xingxing, the tomboy, Du Xiaoyao, and Du Xiaoba were nowhere to be found. Du Xiaofu was not at ease and needed to find them as soon as possible. "Boy, the Great Void General's residence will not let you off. Little bastard, how dare you hurt my second young master? Just wait to be beheaded. When the Divine General knows, he will definitely turn you into ashes." After Dai Xuanming's entourage caught him, they all looked at Du Xiaofu with hatred in their eyes and cursed him incessantly. Their master was destroyed in front of them. This was not a slap in the face, but a death sentence. As subordinates, after Dai Xinming was destroyed, the Great Void General's residence would not let them off. "Unappreciative things, if you don't get lost, I don't mind killing all of you here." Du Xiaofu narrowed his eyes and glanced at those people. Seeing such a look, the group of people from the Great Void General's residence felt a chill run down their spines. There was no need to think too much. Everyone immediately turned around and left, taking Dai Xinming with them. They did not dare to stay any longer. This purple-robed youth dared to attack their master. If he wanted to deal with them, he would not be soft-hearted. "Let's go. Let's go too. If the people from the Great Void General's residence know about this and get angry with us, we will be in trouble. This purple-robed youth is really a devil. He is really a demon king. This method is too cruel. It's better to stay away from him, lest we get into trouble." Many experts were shouting and running away. They were afraid that if they stood too close to Du Xiaofu, they would be caught in the crossfire. Just as he had said, this person was truly worthy of the title of Demon King. He was simply too ferocious. In fact, if they thought about it carefully, they would not be so emotional. For cultivators, killing or being killed was completely normal. They would not be able to get the title of Demon King just because they destroyed someone's cultivation. Because the person Du Xiaofu destroyed today was the second son of the Great Void General's residence. It was precisely because of this that everyone felt a huge disparity. The originally high and mighty expert was being dealt with in such a manner. Such a method was indeed tyrannical enough. Let's go, let's go. As someone took the lead to leave, the crowd rushed out like a swarm of bees. The valley quickly became deserted. Only Du Xiaofu, He Jibai, and a dozen of his subordinates were left. At this time, He Jibai was still in a daze. It was obvious that he had not recovered from the huge shock. The subordinates beside him were not much better. They all looked at Du Xiaofu with a strong sense of horror. Under their gazes, when they saw the purple-robed young man walking towards them, all of them took half a step back in unison, as if they were a little afraid. "Brother, you are in big trouble." He Jibai calmed his thoughts and said with a bitter smile. Everyone in the Yuqing Holy Kingdom knew how high the status of the Great Void General's residence was. Not to mention that no one in the Holy Kingdom dared to provoke them. Even the Emperor God had to give them face. If Du Xiaofu had simply become enemies with Dai Xuanzi and Dai Ming, it would not have been a big deal. But this time, he had directly crippled their second young master. This enmity was too deep. Not to mention the first young master of the Dai family, even the experts of the older generation of the Divine General's residence of the Great Void Divine General would take action. When that happened, the purple-robed youth would be in a very bad situation. "It's okay. I am used to this situation." In response, Du Xiaofu only smiled and gave He Jibai a reassuring look, telling him not to worry. Since he had embarked on the path of cultivation, he had lost count of how many times similar things had happened. The great enemies in the divine martial world, the great Luan sect, the dragons, legalism, the famous scholars, the school of vertical and horizontal martial arts, were all godlike existences to him. However, in the end, they were all stepped on by him. Therefore, he did not take the matter of the Great Void General's residence to heart. Only with a strong opponent would he be able to undergo better training. "I am Du Xiaofu. Thank you for your protection." Du Xiaofu did not explain much to He Jibai. He only stepped forward and clasped his fists solemnly. He slowly developed a good impression of this gentle young man. This person looked very similar to Chenguyu. Both of them were so handsome and elegant. Most importantly, he was not pretentious. He did not hide anything and did not act like a girl. This was also very similar to Chenguyu. Du Xiaofu also wanted to get to know such a person. Moreover, he urgently needed to understand the situation in the 33 heavens and his current situation. From He Jibai, he would be able to quickly understand many things that he wanted to know. "I am He Jibai. Greetings, Brother Du." He Jibai saw that Du Xiaofu did not seem to care at all. He shook off his earlier worries and bowed to Du Xiaofu seriously. "I came from the outside world and accidentally entered here. There are many things that I would like to ask Brother He. Please enlighten me." Du Xiaofu bowed again and said seriously. Chapter 27:13. Du Xiaofu and He Jibai exchanged some pleasantries with each other, then stepped on the road together, heading deeper into this space. From He Jibai's words, Du Xiaofu had a general understanding of the 33 heavens. According to his introduction, every world in the 33 heavens was incomparably vast, and it was difficult to find its borders. Not to mention He Jibai himself, even the older generation of experts in his family, starting from when they were young, had only been to a very small part of the 33 heavens for tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, or even longer. In every world, there were countless powerful forces entrenched in it. Apart from that, there were countless secret realms and dangerous places, containing unimaginable treasures and opportunities. For example, the world Du Xiaofu was in now was a place called the Unparalleled Changrong Heaven, one of the 33 heavens. And in the Unparalleled Changrong Heaven, the top forces were the 36 Holy Lands and 72 Divine Kingdoms. The 36 Holy Lands and 72 Divine Kingdoms were all very powerful, and their strength was difficult to measure. And the overall strength of each Holy Land was far stronger than that of a Divine Kingdom. The weakest Holy Land was more than 10 times stronger than the strongest Divine Kingdom. As for the gap between the other forces, it was even more difficult to measure. The place we are in now is called the Origin Space, a secret realm controlled by the Yuqing Divine Kingdom. It opens once every 2,000 years, and every time it opens, it is a grand occasion, attracting all the younger generation of the kingdom. He Jibai said softly, explaining the situation here to Du Xiaofu. He finally believed that this purple-robed youth really came from another world and knew nothing about this place. Most importantly, he came from a small world, and his knowledge of the 33 heavens was hazy. At first, He Jibai was very surprised. How could there be someone with such a high cultivation in a small world, and someone who was much younger than him? It was really inconceivable. However, Du Xiaofu did not tell him the details of the Shenwu world. He only said that it was not strange for special existences to appear in countless small worlds. He Jibai obviously did not believe this, but he did not ask too much. After all, everyone had their own secrets. Can all the younger generation who have reached the Return to Void realm enter the Origin Space? Du Xiaofu and He Jibai walked side by side, and behind them were the followers of Divine General Zihong's manor. Du Xiaofu was very curious, because when he first entered this place, he saw no less than 700,000 to 800,000 people. It was a spectacular scene. There were so many experts, all of whom were at least at the Void Return realm and above. They were like a dense swarm of locusts flying in the air. Those people were all from Yuqing Divine Kingdom's Yuqing. How powerful a divine kingdom of a divine kingdom was. Is Yuqing's divine kingdom? He Jibai Li Yu, S of the divine kingdom, S is of God kingdom, and his tus to this is an opportunity not to be missed, and not many people are willing to give it up. Therefore, almost all the Return to Void realm experts who have cultivated for less than 1,000 years are here. He Jibai nodded and said. Then, when he saw Du Xiaofu's shocked expression, he seemed to have guessed what he was thinking. He paused for a moment, then continued, in fact, Yuqing Divine Kingdom is ranked last among the 72 divine kingdoms, and can't be compared to the most powerful forces. If you compare it to any of the Holy Lands, it's even worse. As He Jibai spoke, a bitter smile appeared on his handsome face. As soon as these words came out, Du Xiaofu's expression became even more interesting. Yuqing Divine Kingdom was so huge, but it could only be considered last in the Supreme Changrong Heaven. This was too unbelievable. If that was the case, wouldn't the other powerful divine kingdoms and the even larger Holy Lands have an endless number of powerhouses? When he thought of this, Du Xiaofu felt his heart tremble. With such a huge base, it was easy to imagine how many super experts there were. Even among the younger generation, there were definitely many who were stronger than him. He originally came from the outside world and thought that even if the young elites of the 33 heavens were strong, they wouldn't be that strong. But now, it seemed that his thoughts were a little erratic. A great world is really a great world. Compared to it, the divine martial world is simply too weak. Let's not talk about the 33 heavens. Let's not talk about the Supreme Changrong Heaven. Even a small faction from the Yuqing Divine Kingdom could easily sweep through Shenwu world. Du Xiaofu couldn't help but think to himself and felt a little scared. If it wasn't for the suppression of heaven and earth that restricted everyone's cultivation, any small sect in the 33 heavens would be able to dominate an entire world. But Du Xiaofu thought about it and realized that for the experts of the 33 heavens, a small world wasn't very attractive. Whether it was the density of heaven and earth's spirit energy or the natural treasures, it was countless times worse than the 33 heavens. If they were asked to go there, they wouldn't be able to dominate, but to suffer. Only people like the demon god who had nowhere else to go would choose to hide in the divine martial world. The origin space opens once every 2,000 years, but this time, it's a little different. He Jibai saw that Du Xiaofu was in a daze and smiled before continuing. He had already pointed out this point earlier, but Du Xiaofu had ignored it. Oh, what's the difference? Du Xiaofu's interest was piqued, and he immediately asked. In the past, those who were qualified to enter this place had to go through many tests and competitions, and in the end, a certain number of people were qualified. After all, although there are many opportunities and benefits here, It's impossible for anyone to take them as they wish. As He Jibai spoke, he paused for a moment before he continued. The reason it's different this time is because the primeval dimension isn't the place of ultimate tempering, and it's transformed into a grand selection to prepare for an even grander event that's about to arrive. Here, the top 10,000 experts of the Yu Qing Divine Kingdom will be decided. The opening of the origin space this time is just a preparation for what's to come? What kind of grand event will it be? Will it be a competition between several divine kingdoms? Du Xiaofu was shocked again and couldn't help but ask hurriedly. If one divine kingdom was already so powerful, how terrifying would it be if several, or even all 72 divine kingdoms held a grand event together? After Du Xiaofu finished asking, He Jibai laughed heartily and said, "It's not a competition between divine kingdoms, but a grand event held by the entire Changrong heaven. All 36 holy lands, 72 divine kingdoms, and countless other forces of various sizes will be participating." The entire Changrong heaven. Du Xiaofu was already numb from the shock today. A grand event held by the entire Changrong heaven was indeed unimaginably huge. If every force decided to send 10,000 people to participate, there would be at least 1 million people. However, compared to the 700 to 800,000 people who had entered the origin space, these 1 million people were much more powerful. With Du Xiaofu's current strength, it might not be difficult for him to defeat everyone in the origin space, but if he were to place himself in the entire Changrong heaven, the pressure would be incomparably huge. This is an event that's hard to come by in tens of millions of years. Among the experts of the older generation in the Divine General Zihong's residence, none of them have participated in such a grand event before. Moreover, I feel that things won't be so simple this time. I'm afraid it won't be an ordinary training. He Jibai's gaze was unhurried as he sighed. Du Xiaofu fell into a short silence as he pondered over the meaning of He Jibai's words. He felt that his deduction was very reasonable. The grand event that the entire Changrong heaven had arranged must have an ulterior motive. With He Jibai's status, it was still very difficult for him to understand everything. I wonder how long the origin space will last this time? Du Xiaofu suddenly looked at He Jibai solemnly and asked. He was most worried about the safety of the tomboy, Du Xiaoyao, little Xingxing, and the others. Although there were countless benefits in this place, he did not want to waste too much time. If he could get out earlier, finding his loved ones would be the most important thing. However, He Jibai's answer made Du Xiaofu even more worried. The origin space opens once every 2,000 years and lasts for 10 years each time. This time, it's related to the ranking of the entire Yu Qing Divine Kingdom in the future Supreme Changrong Heaven Grand Event. Therefore, we made an exception and changed it to 20 years so that more people can break through to a higher realm and obtain a better ranking. He Jibai didn't even think about it before replying. Hearing this, Du Xiaofu unconsciously frowned. To the cultivators of the 33 heavens, 20 years wasn't much at all. Some powerhouses of the older generation would go into seclusion for thousands, or even tens of thousands of years. For instance, the skeletal old man in the lava space had spent tens of thousands of years in order to refine the blood flame divine lotus. However, 20 years was too long for Du Xiaofu. He had only cultivated for a short few decades. If Du Xiaoyao, little Xingxing, and the others were in danger, it was enough time for many unforeseen events to occur. It's so long. Can we get out earlier? Du Xiaofu raised his head and asked hopefully. This? He Jibai was stunned and asked in confusion. In principle, after entering this place, you are not allowed to leave early. Only some of the older generation who are in charge of the order of this place have the authority to enter and exit freely. However, those people usually don't appear at all. It's very rare to see them. Why? Does Brother Du have something important to do in the outside world? Du Xiaofu nodded and did not hide anything. He directly told He Jibai about how he was separated from the tomboy and Du Xiaohuang. This is a little difficult. He Jibai frowned and fell into deep thought. After a long while, he finally opened his mouth and said, "Our Divine General Zihong's estate also has experts here to maintain order. If I can meet them, I will tell them about this matter and do my best to help you find out more information. However, the Divine General Zihong's mansion is not very powerful in the 33 heavens. The area of influence is also very small. So, he did not finish his words, but Du Xiaofu understood what he meant. The divine general Zi Hong's mansion might be an extremely powerful existence in the Yuqing kingdom. However, if it was placed in the supreme Changrong heaven, or even the entire 33 heavens, it was like a drop in the ocean. It was very inconspicuous. He could only rely on luck to find out the whereabouts of little Xingxing and the others. However, after hearing these words, Du Xiaofu felt a little comforted. He cupped his hands and said, "Brother, his words are enough. I thank you very much. Let's talk about it when there are really results in the future." Ijibai smiled bitterly and shook his head. As the group walked forward, they discussed many things. From Hijibai's words, Du Xiaofu knew that the experts in charge of maintaining order would in fact not interfere with the matters here. The existence of those people was to prevent any accidents from happening here. As for the hundreds of thousands of people who were training here, as long as they did not cause too much trouble, they would not interfere. Fortunately, He Jibai had the means to communicate with the experts in the divine general Zi Hong's mansion. If there was a chance, he could pass on Du Xiaofu's information. Du Xiaofu took this rare opportunity to ask many questions about cultivation. As everyone knew, in the 33 heavens, the cultivation of living beings was divided into 9 major realms: enlightened origin, profound insight, returning to void, seizing spirit, severing truth, immortal, meditative, carrying Tao, and formless. For people like Du Xiaofu who came from Xinwu world, the first 2 realms did not need to be discussed. The returning to void and seizing spirit realms corresponded to Xinwu world's Saint Realm and Sky Saint Realm respectively. But strictly speaking, Du Xiaofu's so-called transcendence of the Sky Saint stage was only a minor stage in the realm of seizing gods. Because he had mastered a complete set of precepts, he had reached the peak of consummation and was only a step away from severing truth. He just did not understand what kind of opportunity was needed to reach severing truth. In other words, he did not know what he was missing. Starting from the returning to void realm, one uses the power of profound to gradually comprehend the laws. There are countless profound in this world, and they are all derived from the true meaning of laws. But there are thousands of paths, and one must always trace back to the beginning. Only the true power of laws is the ultimate goal of living beings' cultivation. As they continued to talk, Hijibai finally believed that Du Xiaofu was really a bumpkin who did not know anything. So, he was happy to be the narrator and explain some things that he could understand. There are thousands of paths, and one must always trace back to the beginning. Only the true power of laws is the ultimate goal of living beings' cultivation. Du Xiaofu smacked his lips when he heard this. He had come into contact with many of the so-called profound. For example, he had grasped the profound of lightning, space, grass of immortality, and dark seeker grass in his early years. However, Du Xiaofu didn't quite understand. If the profound of thunder and lightning could directly transform into the law of thunder and lightning, and if the profound of space could evolve into the law of space, then what kind of law would the profound of immortal grass and dark insight grass be? Brother Du, do you know about the 4 great primitive laws? Ijibai looked at Du Xiaofu seriously and asked him in return. Seeing this, Du Xiaofu could only shake his head. He had never heard of the 4 great primitive laws. Fuibai, the heavenly wood divine tree ancestor, and the others did not say much before leaving the divine martial world. They only told Du Tingxian and the others that they would slowly understand everything once they reached the 33 heavens. The 4 great primitive laws: time, space, matter, and soul. Every single one of them was a supreme existence that could not be surpassed. If you think about it carefully, you will know that everything in this vast great thousand worlds originates from these 4 great primitive laws. Hijibai smiled and explained, time, space, matter, and soul. Du Xiaofu was silent for a long time. After carefully thinking about it, he found that it was as Hijibai had said. Everything in this world was derived from the 4 great primitive laws. Time and space need not be said. The 4 directions are called space, and since ancient times, they have been called Aeon. They form the boundless universe and the flowing river of time. These 2 laws are easy to understand. If you can grasp them, you will be able to see the endless transformations within. It is indescribably wonderful. But in the 33 heavens, there are not many inheritances that have this ability. Moreover, it is mainly dependent on one's own comprehension. As he Jibai spoke, he looked at Du Xiaofu strangely as if he was looking at a monster. He knew that this guy had grasped the space law of the golden-winged great rocks, not to mention where he had obtained the inheritance. Just his comprehension was not something an ordinary person could possess. The most important thing was that this guy came out from a small world. This was way too ridiculous. He Jibai thought for a moment, then said, "As for the matter law, it is a general term. All things are divided into 5 elements: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Heaven, earth, wind, and thunder. Therefore, in this world, there are all kinds of things, wonderful and varied." So that's how it is. Du Xiaofu understood. In an instant, he understood many things. The lightning law that he had grasped and the fire law that he had just comprehended were all derived from the matter law. The elder from the school of vertical and horizontal, who had tried to kill him in the crevice of the world, had grasped the wind law. Dai Xuanzi and Dai Ximing from the residence of the great void divine general had grasped the water law. He Jibai, who was in front of him, was a fire law controller. These different types of laws all belong to the law of matter. The 8 trigrams of the void, which came from the Lord of the 3,000 vast worlds, contained all kinds of true meanings, including all the material laws in the world. It was extremely mysterious and wonderful. Chapter 27:14. When Du Xiaofu had merged with the blood-flame divine lotus, he had seen through some things he had never known before. He had gained a deeper understanding of the void 8 trigrams. He knew that a small void 8 trigrams contained the Tao of endless changes in this world. It was unfathomable and was worth him studying for a long time. Of the 4 primeval laws, all the physical laws could be derived from the void 8 trigrams. However, with Du Xiaofu's current cultivation, it was still too early for him to reach that level. Of the 4 primeval laws, the 4th is the law of soul, or perhaps the law of life. It is the most profound and obscure of the 4. Everything in this world has a spirit, from the ancient gods and demons to worms and plants. He Jibai continued to explain to Du Xiaofu, the law of soul does not refer to the strength of a living being's soul. However, by cultivating some techniques in this area, you can increase the strength of your soul. If you can comprehend some of the principles within and master the law of soul, you can obtain even more wondrous uses. I seem to understand a little. Du Xiaofu nodded, still pondering in his heart. According to what He Jibai had said, the mysteries of the grass of immortality and the dark seeker grass that he had mastered should be related to a certain form derived from the law of soul. However, these 2 mysteries were far from the level of laws. They were more like the product of the fusion of some material mysteries and the law of soul. They had several different characteristics. After He Jibai finished speaking, he saw that the purple-robed youth beside him had sunk into deep thought and did not speak for a long time. The 4 great primordial laws. If I can master all 4 of them, how powerful would I be? Du Xiaofu muttered, sighing from the bottom of his heart. Although his voice was soft, it could not escape He Jibai's ears. He Jibai's handsome face revealed a shocked expression as he looked at Du Xiaofu, as if he had heard something incredible. What's wrong? Du Xiaofu was curious and could not help but ask, Brother Du, you're really daring. He Jibai smiled bitterly and replied, of the 4 great primordial laws, if you can grasp a complete one, you will be able to move unhindered through the 33 heavens and find it difficult to find an opponent. Since the beginning of heaven and earth, perhaps there have been people who have mastered 2 or even 3 of the complete laws. But to say that the 4 great primordial laws have merged into one body, this is really too unimaginable. He Jibai didn't know what to say. He didn't know if this guy really didn't understand at all, or if he was too ambitious. He actually wanted to grasp 4 complete primordial laws of nature at the same time. Is that so? Why couldn't anyone master all 4 complete primordial laws at the same time? Could it be that in the countless years since the birth of the world, there has never been such a genius? Du Xiaofu was extremely curious. Logically speaking, This kind of situation shouldn't have happened. Since the four great primordial laws existed, controlling them at the same time would be very difficult, but it shouldn't have never happened before. Hijibai rubbed his nose and looked at Du Xiaofu with a strange expression. He replied, "Brother Du, you should also know that the carrier and phenomenal realms of the 9 great realms only exist in legends. In reality, such a powerhouse would never appear. Even the meditative realm is an existence that is as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns in the entire 33 heavens. Just like the vast and boundless Chang Rong heavens, I'm afraid you won't find many of them. Moreover, the Yu Qing Divine Kingdom shouldn't have such a powerhouse. As for why it's impossible to grasp all 4 primordial laws at the same time, I don't know. But what I do know is that as long as you master one of them, after reaching perfection, smoothly stepping into the meditative realm in the future will not be a problem. In the absence of carrier and phenomenal realms powerhouses, the meditative realm represents the pinnacle of power in the 33 heavens. Grasping a complete primordial law will allow one to step into the meditative realm in the future. Du Xiaofu finally understood. It seemed that the 4 primordial laws weren't so easy to grasp, but at the same time, he also felt very strange. Since no one seemed to be able to reach the carrier and phenomenal realms, why were they included in the 9 great realms? Hijibai seemed to have seen through his doubts and replied, "Everyone in the 33 heavens knows that all the 33 heavens and countless small worlds evolved from the primal chaos. During the primal chaos, the great god Pangu split heaven and earth, which formed the shape of the entire great thousand worlds. He was the ultimate existence of the phenomenal realm. Since then, the 9 great realms appeared one after another. The carrier realm must have been reached by someone. It's just that the primal chaos was too long ago, so long that there's no way to verify it. No one knows whether the great god Pangu and the carrier realm powerhouses who appeared before are still alive. The great god Pangu split heaven and earth? The shock Du Xiaofu felt today was enormous. He never thought that all the heavens and earth were actually created by people. How powerful would one need to be to do that? The master of the 3,000 worlds and the dragon god, could they do it? He didn't know if the two of them had the cultivation of the carrier realm or even the phenomenal realm. However, Du Xiaofu dared to be sure that they shouldn't be below the meditative realm. Even in the entire 33 heavens, they were existences that could be counted on one hand. Right now, what he wanted to know the most was related to the great god Pangu splitting heaven and earth. However, Hijibai's answer disappointed him. Although everyone in the 33 heavens knew the legend of Pangu splitting heaven and earth, all of this really only existed in the legend, and no one in the present world had witnessed it. Therefore, Hijibai couldn't give him an answer to this. Legends were just legends, but it caused people to have endless fanciful thoughts, sigh, and inexplicable feelings of admiration. The primal chaos space they were in was incomparably vast. As they moved forward without stopping, endless land passed by under their feet. Du Xiaofu was just intending to continue asking about some things, such as what was primal chaos, and the difference between the seizing God stage and the severing truth stage. However, some sudden and unexpected events caused the conversation between him and Hijibai to have no choice but to be abruptly shelved. Something's not right. We seem to have fallen into some kind of formation. Du Xiaofu's figure suddenly stopped, and even Hijibai and his followers were stopped. At this time, their group of more than 10 people was crossing in midair, but suddenly, Du Xiaofu felt a strange aura in the surrounding space. The air was full of energy fluctuations. As he spread out the power of his primordial spirit, he found that the void behind them had become boundless, and all the scenery had disappeared. It became very empty, and it was difficult to find a way back. Chapter 27:15. It really is a formation. We've unknowingly barged in. This formation is really powerful. Originally, Hijibai and the others hadn't noticed anything strange, but after Du Xiaofu's reminder, they carefully observed the situation and realized how strange it was. None of the people present were weak, and they could easily sense how terrifying it was. This isn't an ordinary formation. It seems to be some kind of trapping formation that can isolate the perception of the primordial spirit. With our cultivation, We've completely fallen into it without noticing. Du Xiaofu narrowed his eyes. After some investigation, he found that his primordial spirit power seemed to have fallen into a swamp and could only travel 100 miles at most. This kind of distance was too abnormal for a seasoned divinity expert like Du Xiaofu. The strangest thing was that the space behind them was ethereal, as if it had turned into chaos. Only hazy flashes of light could be seen, and there was no scenery at all. Fortunately, they could still see with their naked eyes, and everything in front of them was still clearly presented to them. Brother Du, I'm afraid this is not a good place. Should we think of a way to leave first? He Jibai's gaze swept over Zhou Weiqi, and he said cautiously. Du Xiaofu's strength was much stronger than his, and He Jibai had already subtly regarded him as the leader of their group. He wanted to hear his opinion before taking action. Isn't there a lot of opportunities hidden in this origin space? This formation looks extraordinary at first glance. Perhaps there are some treasures inside. Let's go deeper and investigate first. Du Xiaofu said after some thought. As soon as he finished speaking, He Jibai also nodded and said, "All right." In fact, he also wanted to explore properly and didn't want to miss any opportunities that might appear. Let's go. Du Xiaofu took the lead, and his figure rushed out. He Jibai and the others immediately followed. However, they hadn't gone too far when they saw dozens of figures flying from afar, intercepting Du Xiaofu's group. Stop! Among the dozens of people, the leader of the group, a man dressed in green, coldly shouted. He looked at Du Xiaofu and He Jibai with a fierce gaze and said loudly, "The people in front of us have important matters to attend to. Stop here, or else you will be killed without mercy." While this man was speaking, the dozens of people behind him were all filled with killing intent. They were indescribably overbearing, as if Du Xiaofu, He Jibai, and the others dared to take another step forward, they would draw their blades and attack. The Divine General's estate is handling matters? When He Jibai heard this, he couldn't help but have some doubts. He was originally from the Zihong Divine General's mansion and had a high status in the Yuqing Divine Kingdom. However, he did not know what was going on ahead. Everyone. He Jibai didn't force his way through. Instead, he calmly cupped his hands and asked, "Which Divine General's mansion are you from?" He didn't reveal his identity because the relationship between the Divine General's mansions wasn't harmonious. It was better to find out the situation first before making any plans. However, as he was an influential figure in the Divine Kingdom, someone among the dozens of people in front of him obviously recognized He Jibai. A person walked out from behind the green-clothed man and moved close to his ear. After whispering for a while, the coldness in the green-clothed man's eyes became a little heavier. "Are you from the Zihong Divine General's mansion?" The man in green looked at He Jibai with some fear, but he didn't show any respect. He said harshly, "No matter who you are, you'd better leave today." "Oh?" He Jibai's handsome eyebrows twitched as he became even more curious. He asked, "Which of the 10 Divine Generals' manners are so arrogant? They actually dared to occupy a territory and set up a forbidden area in the primordial space. Could it be that they want to break the rules of the Divine Kingdom?" When he finished speaking, his tone became a little cold. The chaotic element space was controlled by the Yuqing Divine Kingdom. Anyone who came here was looking for opportunities and benefits to improve their strength. It could be said that here, everything depended on one's strength. As long as one had enough ability, even if one wanted to take everything in the origin space for himself, it was not impossible. However, at this moment, someone set up a boundary and didn't allow them to enter. However, the strength of the Divine General's mansions was almost the same. The other party's strength aroused He Jibai's dissatisfaction. He really wanted to know which Divine General's mansion was so arrogant. Most importantly, the other party had recognized his identity and didn't give him any face and wanted to drive him away. All rules can only be set by the strong. As for the Lord inside, it seems that your Zihong Divine General's mansion can't afford to offend him. So, let me give you a piece of advice. You'd better leave immediately to avoid getting into trouble. The green-clothed man's gaze didn't waver as he stared at He Jibai, then swept his gaze over Du Xiaofu and the others one by one. The threat was extremely obvious. Is that so? He Jibai's face darkened completely. However, Before he could speak, the followers behind him couldn't take it anymore. Immediately, someone jumped out, pointed at the man in green, and shouted, "Who do you think you are? How dare you speak to our young master like that? Looking at your attire, you don't seem to be from the other 9 divine generals' mansions. How dare you bully us with your master's power? Do you want to die? Tell us where you're from. We want to know what kind of force in the Yuqing Divine Kingdom dares to look down on our Zihong Divine General's mansion." More than a dozen of his followers shouted angrily, continuously shouting questions. They had long since noticed that they weren't from the Divine General's estate based on the attire of the dozens of people standing opposite them. In the Divine Kingdom, other than the experts from the Divine General's mansions, there were actually people who dared to disrespect their young master. Even the followers felt ashamed. They really wanted to know who these people were. Were they really tired of living? It seems that the Yuqing Divine Kingdom's waters are deep. Du Xiaofu didn't speak at all. He just listened to the tit-for-tat between these people. Soon, he speculated that there was definitely a big gap in the Yuqing Divine Kingdom, or at least among the 10 Divine Generals' mansions. There was even a hint of hostility. "Brother Du, what do you think we should do?" He Zibai looked back at Du Xiaofu and asked. "Just do as you say, brother He." Du Xiaofu knew that He Zibai was giving him face. In fact, He Zibai already had an idea in his heart. Du Xiaofu gradually had a good impression of this young man who looked very similar to Qingguyu. The key was that he had helped him before. In the origin space, with his cultivation, he shouldn't be afraid of anyone. Therefore, if He Zibai wanted to make a scene here, Du Xiaofu was willing to accompany him to the end. Okay. He Zibai nodded seriously. He naturally knew that Du Xiaofu was supporting him. With an expert who was even more powerful than Dai Shiming by his side, He Zibai's courage increased a little. If we're going to bring trouble upon ourselves by barging in, then this He Zibai is definitely going to get into trouble today. He Zibai laughed coldly. His usual moist and jade-like temperament had become extremely fierce and frightening. This was the appearance an expert should have when facing an enemy. His white clothes fluttered in the wind and were taut, and it made him seem comfortable. A god that stood in the world caused Du Xiaofu to have a whole new level of respect for him. One last piece of advice, young Master He. Don't be ungrateful, lest you lose your life. The green-robed man's expression became extremely ugly as he repeated his words. Where did this clown come from? Quickly make way for our young master. Get out of the way or die. He Zibai had already expressed his attitude. The followers behind him didn't need to be instructed at all. One by one, they rushed out and charged toward the dozens of people in front of them. They couldn't bear it any longer. The arrogance of these people had aroused the anger in their hearts. Dozens of silhouettes soared into the sky, emitting resplendent rays of light, like balls of blazing flames burning fiercely. Endless heat waves rushed out and filled every inch of space, causing the temperature of this area to rise sharply. Stop them! On the opposite side, the green-robed man waved his hand. The dozens of people beside him also moved and intercepted the dozens of experts from the Divine General Zihong Mansion. Streaks of green light rushed out from these people, spreading out like silk and lingering in the void. Seeing the emergence of these green lights, He Zibai and Du Xiaofu raised their eyebrows at the same time, showing that they were a little surprised. The law of wood attribute should have nothing to do with the Beigong family. Du Xiaofu muttered to himself as he thought to himself. Previously, when he was sleeping in the stone coffin in the Du family's ancestral temple, it was because of the help of the 4 young people from the Beigong family that he was able to recover so quickly. After he came to the 33 heavens, he had been thinking about when to go to the family and thank them. However, Du Xiaofu also knew that the foundation of the Beigong family was in the bright jade complete heaven, and this was the supreme Changrong heaven. He reckoned that these people in front of him shouldn't have a deep relationship with them. The people from the Evergreen Valley are quite bold. At the side, He Zibai said softly, with a hint of coldness in his tone. Before Du Xiaofu could express his doubts, He Zibai directly explained to him, "Brother Du, you probably don't know that the Evergreen Valley is a mountain gate force in the territory of the Yuqing Divine Kingdom. It's not considered weak in the entire Yuqing Divine Kingdom. I know that they have always been close to the Divine General Ding Yuan's mansion, but it seems that they have never been so ostentatious. They are very low-key, and their relationship with our family is not bad. However, I don't know why they are so insolent this time. Hijibai's brows were tightly knitted together, as if he was thinking about something. If that's the case, things seem a little strange. Du Xiaofu also spoke and made such a deduction. Hijibai kept nodding his head to express his agreement. He also felt that things were very strange. Logically speaking, the strongest force in the Yuqing Divine Kingdom was the imperial family, and below them were the 10 divine generals' manors. No one dared to casually provoke such a powerful existence. No matter how strong the Evergreen Valley was, they definitely wouldn't dare to look down on a colossus like the Divine General Zi Hong's mansion, even if they had the Divine General Yuan Ding's mansion behind them. From the words of those people just now, Hijibai realized that there was an indescribable strangeness in today's matter. The people from the Evergreen Valley acted abnormally and dared to offend the Divine General Zi Hong's mansion. There was too much strangeness in this matter. Could it be that some incredible treasure appeared inside, causing the people from the Evergreen Valley to be instructed by the people from the Divine General Yuan Ding's mansion to set up a defensive line here to prevent outsiders from entering? Du Xiaofu muttered and made such a guess. He felt that this possibility was very high because the place where everyone was at was inside a formation. If this was a formation left behind from the ancient times, it might really be a great opportunity for him. Let's get rid of these people first. No matter what's strange about it, we'll know when we go in and explore. Hijibai raised his head and his eyes were filled with a strange radiance. Under the gaze of him and Du Xiaofu, the battle ahead was unusually intense. In terms of numbers, the Evergreen Valley had a huge advantage. There were no less than 50 people, which was several times more than the followers of the Divine General Zi Hong's mansion. However, although the Evergreen Valley had the upper hand, they didn't have a huge advantage and there wasn't a one-sided crushing situation. Among the dozens of people, only a few people, led by the green-robed man, had the cultivation of the complete void returning realm. Their average strength couldn't be compared to Hijibai's followers at all. Therefore, it was difficult for them to win in a short period of time. In fact, under the attacks of the dozen young experts who were fighting with rage, some of the weaker Evergreen Valley people were constantly injured. Let's attack together and end this quickly. Du Xiaofu's figure flashed and moved before Hijibai, killing his way into the crowd. Without thinking, he suddenly waved his hand, and a large amount of blazing flames appeared. It was like a wave of fire as it attacked. Huff, huff, huff. The terrifying divine fire shook the air and burned fiercely, directly enveloping the green-robed man and a few other people from the Evergreen Valley. The bright fire soared into the sky and burned the sky red. The green-robed man and the others emitted a green light, but under such fire, they instantly showed a dispirited look. Many people's faces immediately turned ugly. What a powerful fire attribute law. Where did this expert come from? The green-robed man flew back and at the same time, the qi in his body circulated even faster. He set up layer after layer of defense outside his body to counteract Du Xiaofu's flame power. With just a touch, he felt the power of the purple-robed young man. The terrifying power of the fire attribute laws caused his divine soul to throb along with it. All things are divided into the 5 elements. They reinforce and subdue each other. The fire attribute law is the nemesis of the wood attribute. Du Xiaofu knew that under the suppression of his fire attribute law, the people from the Evergreen Valley were a little afraid. In fact, it was because of the restriction of the law attributes that the dozen people from the Great Void Divine General's residence were able to remain undefeated under the siege of over 50 experts. You can't stop us. Just get out of the way, Du Xiaofu said softly. He clenched his right hand as if he was holding a long whip. He grabbed a thick fire chain in his hand and whipped it out fiercely. Whoosh whoosh, the fire whip drew a mysterious arc in the void and made a sharp, whistling sound. It directly attacked the green-robed man's body. Layer after layer of green light was shattered by the whip in the blink of an eye. They turned into fragments and runes flew everywhere. Puff! The green-robed man was sent flying. He spat out a mouthful of fresh blood and his face turned pale. His body was like a bird with broken wings as he fell from the void. He was severely injured after taking a simple hit from Du Xiaofu. Senior. The rest of the people from the Evergreen Valley were shocked. The purple-robed young man was too powerful. With a slight comparison, they could see that his cultivation was much higher than the green-robed man's. The two of them were not on the same level. A few people soared into the sky and rushed toward the green-robed man. They caught him just as he was about to fall to the ground. God-seizing realm. The green-robed man spat out another mouthful of blood. His eyes were filled with shock. After a brief encounter, he was sure that the purple-robed young man was an expert in the God-seizing realm. Even if all the people from the Evergreen Valley were to attack together, they would not be a match for that person, let alone him. Take down all the people from the Evergreen Valley. At this time, He Zhibai also joined the battle and wantonly charged into the crowd. He was also in the void-returning realm, but he had already reached the peak of perfection. The people from the Evergreen Valley could not compare to him. He held a fiery red long sword in his hand. He was like a ferocious lord. Every time he swung his sword, a disciple of the Evergreen Valley would fall from the sky. On the other side, Du Xiaofu did not stop what he was doing. After forcing the green-robed man to retreat, he waved his flaming whip and swept it wildly. With a sweep, a large number of people were sent flying. Ferocious fire-attributed energy surged in the void, firmly suppressing Evergreen Valley's wood-attributed power of profundity. For a moment, screams of agony filled the air. Coupled with He Zhibai's dozen or so followers' continuous attacks, the dozens of people from Evergreen Valley had all fallen to the ground in the time it took to drink a cup of tea. They were all whimpering in pain. "Young master, should we give these people?" Standing in the air, a subordinate came to He Zhibai's side. He glared at him and made a throat-slitting gesture. "A group of small fish and shrimps. They can't do much. Let's go first. I really want to see what kind of treasure is inside that made the divine General Yuanding's mansion value it so much." He Zhibai's expression returned to its usual gentle and calm appearance as he spoke softly. Chapter 27:16. Du Xiaofu and He Zhibai did not kill the people lying on the ground. A small Evergreen Valley could not pose any threat to the divine General Zihong's mansion. These dozens of people were just small fries. The real main characters were in a deeper position. Therefore, instead of wasting time here, it was better to go deeper and see the situation. The group did not waste any more time. All of them rose into the air and quickly flew into the distance. They disappeared into the distant sky in an instant. "Senior brother," they broke through. "What should we do? We didn't guard the perimeter well. Will the divine general's mansion punish us?" Seeing Du Xiaofu and the others leave, a young man beside the man in green asked worriedly. He was guarding the perimeter for the divine general's mansion. However, he did not expect to encounter the people from the divine General Zihong's mansion. He was quickly defeated and could not stop them at all. If he ruined the important matters of the people inside, he was afraid that he and the others would not be able to protect their lives. "It's okay. The divine general's mansion said that we only need to stop some small fries here. As for those with high cultivation, we don't have the ability to stop them." The man in green took a deep breath. After a few people injected some celestial qi into his body, he looked better. He looked in the direction where the dozen people left and did not look away for a long time. He muttered to himself, "The white-robed man just now should be He Zhibai from the divine General Zihong's mansion. I just don't know where the guy in the purple robe came from. I have never heard of such a person." However, his cultivation was simply too terrifying. There are not many people at this age in the Yuqing Divine Kingdom. He is definitely at the top of the younger generation. The man in green sighed. Then, he coughed violently and his face turned red. His eyes were cold and he said fiercely, "However, no matter how strong he is, I'm afraid he won't be able to live for long. If he just barges in, he will have to face the combined forces of the powerful juniors from the divine general's mansion. No matter what, he will not be able to escape death." Senior brother is right. No matter how strong that person is, he will not be able to compete with the experts from the divine general's mansion. Someone beside the green-robed man echoed. The wounded, Find a place with me to regulate your breathing and recover as soon as possible. Those who still had the ability to move continued to patrol the area. Those with low cultivation were not allowed to enter. This time, the divine general's manners are working together, so we must not make any mistakes. The green-clothed man instructed. After a series of arrangements, he led many of the severely injured Evergreen Valley disciples to a certain location. As for the remaining people, they took a short rest and swallowed some medicinal pills before continuing to patrol the area. Du Xiaofu, He Jibai, and the others quickly flew forward. This time, they raised their speed to the maximum. In the blink of an eye, they had traversed several hundred miles. However, the deeper they went, the heavier the atmosphere in their hearts became. What a huge formation! It actually covers such a huge area, He Jibai said with a shocked expression. From the moment Du Xiaofu discovered that they were trapped in the formation, they had already traveled several hundred miles. However, they still did not see the end of the formation, nor did they see any other figures. But the strange thing is that we have gone so far, but we don't seem to feel that the formation's power has increased. Du Xiaofu frowned slightly and said softly, "This was definitely a majestic talisman matrix, but for the time being, no one felt any danger. Everything seemed so strange. The only thing that made people feel uneasy was that there was no way to turn back. Even with Du Xiaofu's cultivation, the power of his primordial spirit could only cover an area of 100 miles in front of him. Not to mention He Jibai and his subordinates, they could only see a distance of a few miles. For experts of their level, the power of their primordial spirit was greatly restricted. It was like being blindfolded by an ordinary person. There was an indescribable feeling of discomfort. Stop! Suddenly, Du Xiaofu's flying movement stagnated and stopped abruptly in the air. Brother Du, what's wrong? He Jibai also stopped and asked hurriedly. There are many people in front, and many of them are not weak in cultivation. Du Xiaofu narrowed his eyes slightly and said. In his perception, there were several hundred figures appearing 100 miles in front of him. They were all experts of the younger generation. Over there, a fierce battle was going on. Moreover, the battle was completely one-sided. The ground was covered with corpses, no less than 100 of them. There was also a bloody mist flying in the air, emitting a fierce aura. At this moment, there were 6 figures that caught Du Xiaofu's attention. They were all quite strong. He did not hesitate and directly described the appearance of those people to He Jibai. However, he did not expect that his face would suddenly change greatly. Brother He, you should know those people, right? Du Xiaofu looked at his expression and could not help but ask. From his expression, it could be seen that He Jibai should be quite familiar with those people. Moreover, perhaps some of them had a deep relationship with him. When Du Xiaofu had just finished speaking, He Jibai's face was already long, and he showed an extremely serious expression. He said, "How could this be? Those people are too bold." In a short period of time, his face changed countless times. It was obvious that he was constantly thinking about the problem in his heart. After a while, he seemed to have finally realized something, and his eyes became firm. He Jibai said hurriedly. Then, he suddenly cupped his fists at Du Xiaofu and said, "Brother Du, according to your description, the people who were besieged were a prince and a princess of Yuqing Kingdom. However, those who attacked were mainly led by the divine general's manners. This matter is too strange. I have to go and take a look." When he finished speaking, Du Xiaofu did not feel much. However, the faces of the subordinates of Divine General Zihong's mansion changed greatly. These people might not have seen the prince and the princess, but they knew how respected their status was. In the entire Yuqing Kingdom, who dared to kill them? However, at this moment, this kind of thing really happened, and it was not far from them. What are those people from the Divine General's manners trying to do? Could it be that they want to rebel? Du Xiaofu frowned and asked in confusion. He was not clear about the situation in Yuqing Kingdom. He Jibai only told him some basic things, but did not tell him too much. However, he could imagine that the water here must be very deep. There's no time to explain. I'll go first. Brother Du, don't get involved in this matter, lest it brings you any trouble. He Jibai did not say much. He cupped his fists at Du Xiaofu and prepared to fly away with his dozen or so subordinates. "I'll go with you to take a look," Du Xiaofu said after thinking about it. Of course, he understood He Jibai's plan. Perhaps this guy wanted to get involved in the battle over there. However, whether it was the divine general's manners or the royal family of Yuqing Kingdom, they were not to be trifled with. Du Xiaofu had already offended the divine general's mansion of the great void divine general and crippled their second young master. It was almost a situation where they would not rest until one of them was dead. At this time, if he got involved in the battle over there, he might really make more powerful enemies for him. He Jibai knew that Du Xiaofu came from a small world and did not have any foundation in the 33 heavens. It was definitely not a good thing to make too many enemies. With the capabilities of the divine General Zihong's mansion, they could not guarantee that they could protect this young man who had a good relationship with them in the face of so many enemies. Moreover, Du Xiaofu could see that He Jibai might not be able to protect himself. The disciples of the divine general's manners were besieging the prince and the princess. There were too many abnormalities in this. There's really no need. He Jibai rejected straightforwardly. However, after thinking for a moment, he said, "How about this? I'll have to trouble Brother Du to find a way to break the formation here. When the time comes, we might need your guidance." "That's good too." Du Xiaofu nodded in agreement and did not say anything else. He Jibai and the others did not delay any longer and quickly left in a hurry. Break the talisman formation? After watching He Jibai and the others leave, Du Xiaofu began to sense seriously. He felt that He Jibai was a good person. If the divine general Zihong's mansion really wanted to get involved in the battle over there, He Jibai and the others would not be able to play any decisive role at all. Therefore, Du Xiaofu was also concerned about breaking the talisman formation. If there was a way to break it, He Jibai and the others would have a chance to escape when they were besieged by hundreds of people. Otherwise, in this strange place, they could only advance but could not retreat. In the end, they would only end up trapped to death. Let's try the law of space, Du Xiaofu thought in his heart. The first form of rising wind, which originated from the golden-winged great rocks, was immediately launched. The light on his body flashed and disappeared. The purple-robed figure also became illusory in an instant. However, after the golden light flashed, he did not suddenly disappear. He still stood in his original position. The first form of rising wind, which had always been successful, actually lost its effect at this time. God-binding grip. Du Xiaofu made his move again. He stretched out his hand and grasped fiercely in the void. Chi! A strong wave of air spread out. However, what made his eyelids twitch was that the space was not crumpled into a ball. There were only some ripples. However, after a breath's time, the space returned to its original appearance, calm and impermanent. This formation is really not ordinary. Du Xiaofu smacked his lips and felt that it was a little tricky. Chapter 27:17. Many of Du Xiaofu's techniques seem to be greatly affected by the strange formation. Due to the influence of the formation, it was very difficult for the laws of space to have any effect on the surroundings. Could it be that this array was man-made? Du Xiaofu pondered. With a flip of his hand, he summoned a thick bolt of lightning and struck the space. With a boom, a hole was blasted open in space by the terrifying energy. Green smoke rose with a sizzling sound. However, as soon as the spatial crack appeared, it quickly disappeared without a trace. During this process, Du Xiaofu also used the power of his soul to peer into the formation. He discovered that he could not leave the place at all. This scene made his heart sink even more. Now, he was finally somewhat certain that the formation was not naturally formed. Perhaps it was left behind from ancient times. Could it be the doing of the people from the divine general's estates? Du Xiaofu guessed. He felt that this was very likely. When he was blocked by the people from the Evergreen Valley earlier, he thought that the divine general's estate had discovered some treasure in the depths of the formation. That was why they did not allow others to set foot in it. However, combining what had happened up ahead and the strangeness of the formation, Du Xiaofu was almost certain that everything here was done by the people from the divine general's estates. Their goal was to trap a prince and a princess of the Yuqing divine kingdom. There's probably some kind of conspiracy behind this, Du Xiaofu mumbled softly. He had some guesses about the situation in the Yuqing Divine Kingdom. He did not care too much about these things, but he had a good impression of He Jibai. If he could help a little, he would be very happy. However, after a few more attempts, he was still unable to see through the mysteries of the formation. At this moment, not only was the most violent method unable to break through it, even the wonders of the Scarlet Horse Monkey Soul could not do anything about the formation. After a long while, Du Xiaofu felt rather powerless. There was nothing he could do about the strange formation. Let's go there and take a look first. As Du Xiaofu thought about it, he flew up and headed in the direction that He Jibai had left. With his strength, he only needed a moment to cover the distance of a few hundred miles. However, he was not in a hurry to participate in the battle over there. He only stood on top of a short peak, restrained his aura, and quietly watched. At the end of Du Xiaofu's line of sight, several hundred figures were flying up and down, engaged in a fierce battle. These people were divided into two groups. One group was led by 4 young men, and their numbers made up the majority. On the other side, a man and a woman who had been separated were resisting with great difficulty. Of the two parties, the former had the absolute upper hand, ruthlessly suppressing the man and woman and their subordinates. After He Jibai joined in, he directly joined the camp of the man and woman and directly confronted the former. That man and woman must be the prince and princess of the Yuqing Divine Kingdom. Du Xiaofu looked at the two people and muttered. He did not know how many princes and princesses the Divine Emperor of the Yuqing Divine Kingdom had. However, looking at the two people over there, the man was handsome and the woman was beautiful. Their bodies exuded a unique noble aura. Even though he was besieged by many experts and was in a desperate situation with injuries all over his body, he still showed some unconcealable pride. Qi Weicheng, are the people of the divine General Yuan Ding's mansion rebelling? He Ibai held a huge flaming light sword in his hand and wanted to rush into the crowd to help the princess of the Yuqing Divine Kingdom. However, he was blocked by several people, including his subordinates. The people he was talking to were the two people who had joined forces to attack the princess. They looked somewhat similar and were both tall and sturdy. They looked like brothers. As the two of them attacked, waves of yellow light rippled and condensed into mountain-like scenes that pressed down on the woman's head. Faced with He Jibai's question, one of them only snorted coldly and did not answer. The other person sneered and sneered. He Jibai, with your strength, you dare to shout in front of us? If that beautiful elder sister of yours were to come, perhaps I would be a little more fearful of her. But you are far from enough. As the person spoke, the corner of his mouth could not help but curl into a strange smile. At the same time, he looked at the princess in front of him with a strange light in his eyes. He Jibai, leave quickly, don't worry about us. My royal brothers and sisters are in the origin space. Go find them quickly. The princess of the Yuqing Divine Kingdom shouted. Her face was delicate and her body was very alluring. At this time, a strand of her hair was wet with sweat and stuck to her forehead. There was a trace of blood on the side of her lips, and her light green dress was a little messy. One attack after another shot out from her seemingly delicate palms, resisting the attacks of Qi Weiqing and Qi Weidun one by one. Little princess, I will hold them back. You and the 6th prince quickly leave. He Jibai did not agree. Instead, he instantly erupted with a trace of wildness. A long and clear whistle came from his mouth. It was like the sound of heaven and quickly spread through the field, entering everyone's ears. Then, the aura of He Jibai's body suddenly increased. Layers of blazing flames wrapped around his body, making him look like a burning human figure. His aura was indescribable. Get out of my way, He Jibai shouted. He raised his sword and fiercely slashed down. A huge sword light roared and shook the sky, brazenly slashing down. Qi-la, a huge hole was burned in the void by this sword, and the smell of burnt flesh filled the air. A terrifying energy surged out and crazily swept out, blowing away the dozen people around him. At the same time, all of his subordinates moved upon hearing this. They abandoned their opponents and quickly gathered by He Jibai's side. They worked together to open up a path for him. Kill. Hijibai's handsome face was filled with a strong, murderous aura. His black hair fluttered in the wind. The sword in his hand fiercely slashed out, cutting a young expert at the advanced stage of the void returning stage in half. The corpse fell from the sky rapidly. The cut was charred black by the flames and emitted the smell of meat. His strength was not considered weak among the younger generation of the Kingdom of God's imperial family and the 10 divine generals' residences. At this time, the people who surrounded him were all subordinates of the divine General Yuanding's residence. No one had a higher cultivation than him. Therefore, when he went berserk, even if many people surrounded him, they could not stop him at all. Humph, Hijibai, you are courting death. On the other side, among the two people who were fighting with the little princess, a man in a black robe abandoned his opponent and went straight for Hijibai. Qi Cheng. It seems that the divine General Yuanding's residence, the divine General Xian Huang's residence, and the divine General Nie Huang's residence really want to rebel? Hijibai asked coldly. He did not dodge and directly fought with the other party. As he spoke, a huge sword light soared into the sky. Countless fire attribute energy fluctuations caused the temperature of the area to rise rapidly. There are some things that you are not qualified to know. However, since you came here without thinking, you can only blame your bad luck. The only outcome is to die here. The black-robed man, Qi Cheng, responded coldly. He waved his arm and a sharp golden light burst out, condensing into a heaven-splitting divine sword. It brazenly collided with Hijibai's sword light. Boom! The collision of the two strong forces caused a loud explosion that shook the sky. The surrounding space could not help but tremble. Large amounts of golden runes and fiery red runes rose densely, jumping and boiling like a flock of dancing snakes. Hijibai and Qi Cheng both let out a muffled groan at the same time. Their figures were shaken, and they retreated 200 feet away. The strength of the two people was only about the same. With just one blow, it was almost a tie. However, before Hijibai could stabilize his footing in the air, several figures had already pounced on him from the side. These people were all related to Divine General Yuanding's mansion. They wanted to take advantage of Hijibai's unguarded opening to attack him. A bunch of ants. Get lost for this young master. Hijibai lightly snorted and instantly moved with a wave of his hand. The fire attribute energy surged and spread out quickly. The sky was burned red in an instant. As soon as such a scene appeared, it immediately stopped the several pouncing figures for a moment. Immediately after, Hijibai also adjusted his posture. The flaming sword in his hand swung out horizontally, and a large amount of terrifying energy rolled out. Several miserable screams rang out in succession. Several young experts who were besieging Hijibai were instantly shaken back. Among them, 2 of them had suffered heavy injuries. Kill. At this time, Qi Cheng once again arrived, bringing with him an incomparably terrifying aura. The sharp and peerless energy seemed to be the sharpest thing in the world. Wherever the golden light passed, it was like a small knife, cutting open wounds in the air. Kill. Hijibai also shouted loudly, and once again engaged in a fierce battle with Qi Cheng. Both sides were evenly matched. In a short period of time, no one could do anything to the other. With Hijibai's suppression, the little princess's side was much more relaxed. Her strength was also very valiant. After having one less opponent, she immediately stabilized her situation and was locked in battle with Qi Viden. Those 3 people are actually in the seizing divinity realm. They really aren't weak. In the distance, Du Xiaofu saw everything. His gaze moved away from Hijibai, Qi Cheng, the little princess, and Qi Dun to look at the other main battlefield. There, the 6th prince of Yuqing Divine Kingdom was struggling to hold on. His opponents were 2 young experts in the seizing divinity realm. Neither of them was below him in strength. In such a situation, he could only parry and had no strength to fight back. In addition, their followers were almost all killed. Only a few people were still tenaciously resisting. On the other hand, on the other side, hundreds of people had gathered to attack them. The situation was not optimistic at all. Zichen Island, Tianxian Gate, Sacred Temple. You colluded with the Divine General Yuanding's mansion. the Divine General Xian Huang's mansion, and the Divine General Nie Huang's mansion to attack a prince and princess. Aren't you afraid that the imperial army will come and crush your orthodoxy? The sixth prince's sword-like eyebrows were tightly knitted together as he questioned loudly. If he wasn't surrounded by a large group of people, it wouldn't be too difficult for him to shake off his two opponents and escape through the ground. In the face of the sixth prince's question, no one answered. Everyone moved with all their strength. Again and again, terrifying attacks were launched. Terrifying energy whistled in the air, constantly attacking the sixth prince. The two young men in the seizing divinity realm who led the group sneered. "You Chengliang, don't be delusional. Today, this will be your burial place. Your death has come." One of the two people who had attacked shouted loudly. He punched the void, like a giant hammer smashing a mountain, and made a terrifying sound. He went straight for the sixth prince. "Zhongsu, is your divine general Xian Huang's mansion not afraid of being exterminated?" The sixth prince, Yu Chengliang, had just dodged the saber of another expert and hurriedly met the fierce fist coming at him. He continued to fight fiercely with the two people. On a small mountain in the distance, Du Xiaofu watched all this quietly and did not intervene for the time being. He could see that even though the battle was one-sided, the two princes and the princesses, as well as He Zhibai, should still be able to protect themselves for the time being. The sixth prince, Yu Chengliang, intended to use fierce words to create a certain fear in the hearts of his opponents, so that he would be more relaxed when facing the enemy. Unexpectedly, his opponents did not seem to care about his words at all, and attacked with all their might. Only the experts, other than the two divine generals' mansions, had some changes in their eyes, but they did not waver much. Three divine generals' mansions working together to kill the prince and princess of the Yu Qing divine kingdom. This matter is not simple. Du Xiaofu thought to himself, and felt that there was an indescribable conspiracy in this matter. By now, he already knew the 10 divine generals' mansions of the Yu Qing divine kingdom: Taishu divine general's mansion, Zihong divine general's mansion, Yuan Ding divine general's mansion, Nie Huang divine general's mansion, and Xian Huang divine general's mansion. As the most powerful forces under the divine kingdom's imperial family, they should be loyal and devoted, and should be the most trusted people of the divine emperor. Today, the disciples of the three divine generals' mansions appeared here, and seemed to be carrying out an act of rebellion. This could not help but make a lot of assumptions. This origin space will be open for 20 years. We have just entered this place, and such a thing has already happened. I really don't know if there will be any changes in the outside world. Du Xiaofu thought to himself. The disciples of the three divine generals' mansions must have been instructed to act like this, and it was impossible for them to act rashly. He Zhibai once said that in the origin space, there would be some experts of the older generation to maintain order in order to prevent too much chaos. Divine General Zihong also had people involved. What happened here shouldn't be able to escape the prying eyes of those people. Chapter 27:18. Du Xiaofu stood on the short peak, quietly watching the progress of the battle. He did not have much of a relationship with the royal family of the Yu Qing divine kingdom, so he did not intend to interfere even if the divine generals' mansions were plotting against him. However, if He Zhibai was in danger, Du Fu did not mind helping him. As for anything else, it had nothing to do with him. More people are coming? As Du Xiaofu was thinking, he raised his eyebrows and glanced in another direction. Under his perception, many figures were flying over from afar, rushing towards the battlefield. The aura emitted from those figures was not weak. They were at least in the virtual realm. Among them, there was one whose strength made Du Xiaofu feel a little wary. Another two experts in the seizing god realm have arrived. The one leading them has reached the peak of the seizing god realm. Du Xiaofu sensed silently. At the same time, those figures quickly appeared in his field of vision. There were about 20 of them. Du Xiaofu had concealed his aura, so they did not notice his presence. He observed for a moment. These 20 people were led by a gloomy-looking young man. As soon as they arrived, they immediately rushed to the battlefield, ready to join the battle. The gloomy-looking young man in the lead was at the peak of the seizing god realm. He was probably not much weaker than Du Xiaofu. What surprised him the most was that there was a man in black following behind the young man. He was short and had a sharp chin. He unconsciously gave off a sense of arrogance. Du Xiaofu naturally knew this person. It was Dai Xuanzi, the third young master of the Divine General's mansion, who had been beaten up by him outside the cave of the bloody-flamed Divine Lotus. As for his second brother, Dai Xinming, who wanted to stand up for his younger brother, his cultivation was destroyed by Du Xiaofu and he became a cripple. At this time, Dai Xuanzi and his group appeared. It was unknown whether they were on the side of the Yuqing Divine Kingdom's royal family or the three Divine Generals' mansions. If it was the former, He Zhibai's life would not be in danger even without Du Xiaofu's help. With the strength of the young man in the lead, it was enough to change the situation after he joined the battle. If these people came to help the three Divine Generals' mansions, the result would be even worse. Only Du Xiaofu's help could save He Zhibai from this crisis. The situation doesn't look good, Du Xiaofu muttered as he touched his chin. Under his gaze, Dai Xuanzi and the rest of the 20 or so people arrived and surrounded them, trapping everyone inside. While the young man in the leading young man stood, watching the battle. Young Master Dai, young Dai. On the battlefield, the man named Zhong Su, who was fighting with the sixth prince, Yu Chengliang, opened his mouth and said, Zhong Su, Wang Qishuan, it's been so long, and you still haven't finished your battle. Looks like I have to make a move. Among the 20 people who had just arrived, the gloomy young man in the lead slowly swept his gaze across the field and said coldly. Du Xiaofu heard their conversation from afar and was slightly taken aback. He thought to himself, so this person is the young master of the Great Void Divine General's mansion, Dai Xinming and Dai Xuanzi's brother. Du Xiaofu felt pressured by the fact that there was someone with such a profound cultivation among the younger generation of the Great Void Divine General's mansion. Judging from the power that was faintly emanating from young Master Dai's body, young Master Dai was definitely not much weaker than himself. Most importantly, it seemed that they had joined forces with the other three Divine Generals' mansions and were going to attack the princes and princesses of the Divine Kingdom. Dai Xuanjin, is the Great Void Divine General's mansion rebelling too? Zhong Su and young Master Dai's conversation was also heard by everyone else. He Zhibai, who was fighting with Qi Weicheng, couldn't help but shout angrily. Humph! The Great Void Divine General's mansion doesn't need to report to the Zihong Divine General's mansion. Moreover, you're going to die sooner or later. Just now, I'll get rid of you right here and now. Dai Xuanjin snorted coldly as a misty light surrounded him. It was like a ripple of water, rippling with extraordinary splendor. In this gorgeous light, there was a gentle power, but what was hidden was an unparalleled murderous aura. His robe fluttered, and his figure suddenly rose into the air. In the blink of an eye, he was beside He Zhibai. Kill! Dai Xuanjin let out an explosive roar, shaking the void until it collapsed one after another. The water attribute power around him changed its nature in an instant. It changed from the most gentle attribute to a fierce and domineering power. Waves of icy aura rose, and white mist rose in spirals in the air. The dense mist surged and emitted a bone-chilling coldness. Then, it condensed into a huge, icy sword light that seemed to penetrate the heavens and the earth. It was held high above Dai Xuanjin's head. The lower end was held in his hand, and he slashed down fiercely. This sword was like a thunderbolt that could split mountains. It carried a domineering and fierce power. In an instant, it cut through the barrier of space and arrived in front of He Zhibai. Boom, boom, boom. The earth was cracking and the void was trembling. It was as if this part of the world was being grabbed by an invisible hand and violently shook. In the battlefield of hundreds of people, many figures couldn't help but tremble. They seemed to be unable to stand steadily and were greatly affected. Many of the attacks that were condensed by the weaker people were also disintegrated in an instant. They turned into pieces of runes and scattered. He Zhibai, watch out! Seeing this terrifying scene, the little princess immediately shouted to remind He Zhibai. Anyone could see that this terrifying attack was condensed with a large portion of Dai Xuanjin's strength. He wanted to destroy He Zhibai with a single strike. There was almost a gap of a large realm between the two of them. With He Jibai's cultivation at the peak of the complete void return stage, there was no way he could block this sure-kill sword. In fact, there was no need for the little princess to remind him. When Dai Xuanjin raised his sword, He Jibai already knew his opponent's goal. He didn't dare to delay. He directly waved the huge flaming sword and forced his opponent, Qi Weicheng, to retreat several meters. Then, He Jibai's sword of light soared into the sky. During this process, blazing runes danced and condensed into a huge sword light that slashed towards Dai Xuanjin's attack. Ah! He Jibai let out a crazy roar like a furious lion. His black hair stood on end and rushed into the sky. He knew that Dai Xuanjin's strength was far from what he could deal with. So, even his gaze started to become fierce. He wanted to do his best to block this attack. Otherwise, what awaited him was only death. Humph, with my big brother here, He Jibai, you're dead meat this time. Not far away, Dai Xuanzi couldn't help but laugh coldly as he watched the scene unfold. He naturally knew that the brat who had beaten him up miserably outside the strange cave a few days ago should have been with He Jibai these few days. He didn't have a good impression of the divine General Zihong's mansion. Now that things had reached such a stage, he was naturally happy to see He Jibai die in the hands of his big brother. It's a pity that the little bastard didn't appear here with you. Otherwise, I would definitely make him beg for death and make him regret being born in this world. Dai Xuanzi thought viciously. The ruthlessness on his face was very strong. When he thought of the young man in the purple robe, there was an indescribable hatred in his heart. He originally thought that the other party was just a disciple from a small mountain sect, but he didn't expect the other party's cultivation to be so strong. He was no match for the other party at all. After a few exchanges of blows, the dozen people from the Divine General's mansion were completely defeated by the other party. That was not all. Most importantly, he had informed his second brother to avenge him. He thought that it would be easy for his second brother, Dai Xianming, to take down the kid with the strength of the divine realm. However, who would have thought that the brat was actually much stronger than his second brother, causing his second brother to become a cripple in his hands? The Divine General's mansion had to avenge this grudge no matter what. No matter where the little bastard is now, since you're so close to him, you should die first. Dai Xuanzi's heart was filled with hatred as he looked coldly at the situation on the battlefield. At this moment, the attacks of Dai Xuanjin and He Jibai had already collided, and an earth-shaking roar erupted. Crackle! The runes that fluttered in the sky drowned out everything, and the figures of He Jibai and Dai Xuanjin were completely covered. At the same time, waves of terrifying energy fluctuations spread out and swept across the sky and the ground, spreading out in all directions. At the place where the two people were submerged, the power of ice and the power of fire intertwined and surged in the air. After the two completely opposite forces collided, a terrifying aura erupted. Many figures in the surroundings quickly retreated at the first moment. They didn't dare to stay in the center of the battle. The energy waves were monstrous and swept out in all directions. Terrifying cracks appeared in the void due to the terrifying power, and it was terrifying. He Jibai, young master, the first Prince Yu Chengliang, the little Princess Yu Chengyu, and the people from the Divine General Zihong's mansion who had followed He Jibai here all cried out in alarm. Under their gazes, the endless power of ice was rapidly devouring the power of fire. In just a few breaths' time, the void was completely filled with the power of ice, and the originally ferocious power of fire was completely crushed, its powerful momentum suppressed. Everyone could see that He Jibai was far from being a match for Dai Xuanjin. After this attack, he was definitely in a perilous situation. Kiki, He Jibai is dead for sure this time. He can only blame himself for his ignorance. We haven't found him yet, but he barged in here by himself. Our 7 Divine Generals' mansions have already decided that he will die sooner or later. The result will be the same whether he dies sooner or later. In the distance, Qi Weicheng and Qi Weidun of the Divine General Yuan Ding's mansion, Zhong Su of the Divine General Xian Huang's mansion, Wang Qishuan of the Divine General Nie Huang's mansion, and the others spoke one by one with a cold tone. Since they dared to besiege the prince and princess of the Divine Kingdom, they were naturally prepared. This time, The 7 divine generals' mansions had joined forces to plot an earth-shattering event. What ability did the people of the divine general Zi Hong's mansion have to get involved? Since He Jibai was so reckless and had crossed the line of defense set up by their side, he could only blame himself for seeking death. Get ready to kill. Killing a prince and a princess is just the appetizer. The best is yet to come. With young Master Dai here, no one, including Yu Chengliang and Yu Chengyu, can escape. Let's end this quickly and get rid of the trouble here. There are more powerful characters waiting for us to deal with. A group of experts were all rubbing their fists, ready to go all out. They all widened their eyes and stared at the center of the battlefield where Dai Xuanjin and He Jibai were fighting. As soon as He Jibai's sorry figure appeared, they would immediately take action and get rid of everything here. With the existence of a powerful expert like Dai Xuanjin, they would definitely clean up all their targets like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. Even a fly would not be able to leave this place. Under everyone's gaze, the billowing energy storm finally subsided slowly and the world returned to normal. However, everyone was surprised to find that only Dai Xuanjin's figure was left in the air. He Jibai's existence was nowhere to be seen. This young Master Dai's strength is so strong that He Jibai's corpse is not even left behind? This is too terrifying. Someone immediately exclaimed in surprise, his eyes filled with extreme shock. The rest of the people were not any better. They all looked at Dai Xuanjin as if they were looking at a monster. Even the disciples of the 3 divine generals' manners were the same. At the same time, what they felt was not only shock, but also a hint of fear. How can a puny He Jibai be compared to my big brother? He died without a complete corpse and turned into ashes. What's so strange about that? Only Dai Xuanzi, who was standing at the front of the crowd, snorted coldly. His arrogant head was raised and his nostrils were pointed to the sky. It was as if everyone's reverence was because of him. As soon as he spoke, the people beside him did not reply. Only Zhongsu, Wang Qishuan, and a few others glanced at him. There was some disdain in their eyes, but they did not express it. Everyone stared fixedly at Dai Xuanjin. In the distance, the young man stood in the air. His robes fluttered without the wind, and rays of gorgeous light lingered around his body. It made him look like a god who was standing proudly in the world. However, no one noticed that Dai Xuanjin's expression had become quite serious at this moment. He did not feel relaxed because of He Jibai's disappearance. On the contrary, it could be seen that the gloominess in his eyes was even denser than before. What a powerful technique of the law of space, Dai Xuanjin muttered. His gaze flickered as he glanced to the side and fell into the distance. At the end of his line of sight, there were 2 figures standing in the void. The white robes of one of them were in tatters and hung on his body like strips of cloth. He was in a sorry state. This person was He Jibai, who had suffered a blow from Dai Xuanjin earlier. Even though He Jibai looked to be in an extremely sorry state at this moment, it was not difficult to see that his aura was calm and his expression was only slightly pale. It was very obvious that he had not suffered much damage. Beside him stood a young man in a purple robe, and he stood side by side with He Jibai. At this moment, along with the direction Dai Xuanjin's gaze was looking at, everyone saw the situation over there. In just an instant, the crowd started to discuss animatedly once more. Moreover, this time, it was like a pot of boiling water had exploded. How is this possible? He Jibai is actually not dead. He's still alive. It looks like he hasn't suffered any serious injuries. This is too unbelievable. A Void Return Realm cultivator actually managed to survive a single strike from young Master Dai. It's simply unbelievable. Who's that young man in a purple robe beside him? When did he appear? He Jibai's strength is definitely not that strong. It must be that person who acted and saved him from young Master Dai. Where did this person come from? Who is he? Everyone started to discuss animatedly, and it was very lively. Even Yu Chengliang, Yu Chengyu, Wang Qishuan, Zhongsu, and the other hostile parties were no longer in a hurry to fight to the death at this time. All of them looked at the purple-robed young man in the distance with curious gazes. Among the crowd, only one person's eyes flickered for an instant when he saw the purple-robed young man. He took half a step back slightly as if some fear had suddenly arisen in his heart. However, it did not take long for this fear to quickly turn into a heart full of anger and hatred very quickly. This person was Dai Xuanzi. It's him. Dai Xuanzi frowned tightly, and he wished he could crush his teeth in his mouth. He would recognize that purple-robed young man even if he turned into ashes. Wasn't that the person he met outside the strange cave that day? His second brother was also crippled by him. If not for his insufficient strength, Dai Xuanzi wished he could immediately charge forward and tear that little bastard to pieces. However, he was not worried because now that his big brother was present, all hatred would be repaid today. Kid, who are you? How dare you interfere in the affairs of the various divine generals' estates? In the distance, Dai Xuanzhen looked at the purple-robed young man and said coldly. Dai Xuanzi quickly went to his big brother's side and told him about Du Xiaofu. Dai Xuanzhen's brows furrowed more and more tightly as he listened, and his face was filled with a murderous aura. Only now did he know that it was the young man in front of him who had turned his second brother into a cripple. This made his head burn with rage, and he clenched his fists so tightly that they made cracking sounds. He wished he could immediately charge forward and chop that young man into 108 pieces. However, before Dai Xuanzhen could flare up, Du Xiaofu, who was opposite him, spoke slowly. The people of the Great Void Divine General's estate are all the same. Each one is more arrogant than the other. He shook his robe lightly and said firmly, I don't care what Divine General's estate you are. I'll interfere in the affairs here if I want to.